Please be seated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on the record in CR 2015-001671-001, 003, and 004. State of Arizona versus Gerald Bowman, Marcus Morris, and Markeith Morris. For the record, we're back in the presence of the jury. All counsel are present, along with all defendants. Mr. Hood is back on the stand and still under oath. Mr. Fisher, your redirect examination, please.
Good morning, Mr. Hood.
Good morning.
All right, Mr. Hood, I want to start off asking you some clarifying questions regarding your testimony yesterday on cross-examination. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you a question. Yesterday, during questioning from defense in this case, were there any times where you felt hesitant or afraid to answer because you felt like you were being tricked at all?
Never afraid, but definitely I felt like I was trying to be led a different way. Okay.
And today, in my clarifying questions, there were some times where you were asked questions yesterday where they were calling for yes or no answers, and it looked like there were times you wanted to explain some of those answers. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And I want to give you an opportunity today to explain some of those questions, but I'm asking you if there's ever a question that you don't understand from me, please let me know that, okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Fisher, would you mind taking that screen and moving it down? Thank you.
First of all, there was a question asked yesterday by defense about what you had done to prepare for your testimony. Do you recall being asked that question?
Yes.
And you had indicated that you had been given material by me. I think you referenced the police report. Do you remember making that statement yesterday?
I never received a police report from you.
So my question to you, Mr. Hood, is you indicated in cross-examination yesterday that you had met with me once before, and I believe you said it was about a week ago. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
And that materials were provided from me to you. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
What materials did you receive from me that you reviewed prior to your testimony?
I received two CD-ROMs.
What's on those CDs, Mr. Hood?
It was audio of my interviews with Detective Santos, and it was the video of the game.
Okay. So is it fair to say that what was provided to me, what was provided by me to you was not the police report?
No, I never received the police report from you, no.
Have you reviewed the police report in this case?
No.
During the course of this case, which fair to say it's been about 2.5 years since the incident?
Sadly, yes.
Okay. You've spoke to attorneys in this case other than myself, and let me be specific about that. You've spoken to your civil attorneys, is that correct?
Barely.
Okay. The nature of your conversations with them, and again, I don't want to ask about anything that is privileged, but did you provide them with updates about this case?
Semi, yes.
Okay. What about, you have an attorney present in court today, and her name is Miss Jessica Gattuso, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Is that your civil attorney?
No, she's my victim's rights attorney.
Okay. Now, there were some questions about how the fallout between you and the Morris brothers was relayed to you yesterday. Specifically, Mr. Eckstein was asking you whether you received a text message from one of them or both of them. Do you remember these questions being asked yesterday?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe on direct, you indicated you received these communications when you had gotten off an airplane, is that right?
Yeah, as everyone know, you have to turn your phone off, so turn my phone off. When I powered it back up, that's when, you know, not just texts or voicemails from them, but anybody that was trying to get in contact with me when I was traveling from Lawrence.
And so I'm clear, how do you believe that information was relayed? Was it a text, voicemail, both? Can you clarify? It was both?
Sorry, yes, both.
Okay. And in terms of, you remember, and I'm not going to assume anything, you remember yesterday being asked about multiple conversations you had with Phoenix police officers, including a first responder and some interviews later with Detective Santos?
Vaguely, with the first guy, but with Detective Santos, yes.
Now, did you tell Detective Santos when you were first interviewed by him that you had had a falling out with the Morris brothers?
I believe so, yes.
And do you believe, well, let me ask you this. Why did you tell him that? Why did you think that that was at all relevant to Detective Santos, the case detective in this case?
I just thought that it was important that he knew the dynamics of our relationship prior to me getting attacked.
Did you think, and I'm asking you for what you thought, Mr. Hood, did you think that the dynamics of that relationship had any relation to what had occurred to you on January 24, 2015?
Yes, sir.
We talked on direct, and I believe there were some questions on redirect about whether you knew Alonzo Hickerson and Coach Greg.
Yes.
Those people.
Yes, sir.
And remind me again, Mr. Hood, what is Coach Greg's last name?
Right, Coach Greg Wright.
Right?
Yes.
Had you been to, well, let me ask this. They're both affiliated, or at least at the time, affiliated with the same basketball team, the Reno Prep team?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Had you been to Reno Prep games prior to the one you went to the night of January 24th, 2015? Had you been to those games before in Phoenix?
I've approximately been to maybe 8, 9 games, yes.
Okay. And had you ever seen the Morris twins at any of the games you went to for the Reno Prep team before January 24, 2015? Had you ever seen them at those games?
No, sir.
You know, we had some questions about timing yesterday, and I know, Mr. Hood, we're asking you to remember 2.5 years ago. Do you know roughly what time of day the basketball game started on January 24, 2015? Was it in the evening?
I don't believe so. It was light when I walked in.
And do you recall, I showed you some exhibits on direct, because my question was about timing, but the text to Thomas E. Morris, did you send those before or after you went to the basketball game?
She texted me first. It's a good question.
And Mr. Hood, would it refresh your recollection to look at the text messages?
Yes.
Exhibit 61 through 65, which have previously been admitted.
Yes.
If I can have you look at the text messages and see if it indicates about what time you told Miss Thomasine Morris you were heading to Coach Greg's game.
She texted me at 5:42 p.m., asked me what was I doing. What you doing is exactly what she asked me. I said at Coach Greg's game, and then I asked her, and you.
So if I asked you if the basketball game started around 6 p.m. that night, does that sound about correct to you, Mr. Hood?
Yes.
And we covered a little bit of this earlier, but there were some questions relating to timing, and I think you can answer this question. How long were those basketball games slated to be, meaning time on the clock?
2 20-minute halves. They stopped the clock. So roughly around hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, something like that.
Give or take what happens in the basketball game?
Stoppages, timeouts, foul shots, certain stuff like that.
And this basketball game, did it go to overtime that night, or do you remember?
No overtime, no sir.
Okay. And you've had an opportunity to view the exhibit, which is the film of that game, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was your testimony on direct, and then I believe again on cross-examination, that you saw the Morris brothers leave prior to the basketball game ending, leave the gymnasium.
Yes.
And how long before the game ended do you think that was?
They left with approximately about 50 seconds left on the clock.
And how long, Mr. Hood, after you saw them leave, did you remain in the gymnasium?
At least 25, 30 minutes.
And I believe on cross-examination you were asked about some of the people that you talked to. One of the names was Knives Gilbert. Does that name sound familiar?
Yes, the lady from Australia.
Did you talk to her after the basketball game?
Yes.
Inside the gymnasium?
Yes.
So you believe it was at least 20 minutes?
No, for a fact.
Okay.
And that's being liberal.
Okay. Now you had testified you walked out the door and boom, you encountered Julius Kane right at the door
The second set of the double doors
of the outside of that gymnasium.
of the outside, yes.
And then shortly thereafter, you're hit from the back.
Yes.
And I believe you testified at this point that you take off running, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to go through all of the steps you've already testified to as to what you recall after that, but it's fair to say that from the point in which you start running to the point in which, at the end of this, you wake up unconscious, you saw both Morris brothers outside of the gymnasium that night. Is that correct?
Near me, near the fray, yes.
Okay. And you testified that you had seen Marcus kick you at some point during that assault.
Positively, yes.
So is it fair to say, Mr. Hood, based on your recollection, that even though the Morris brothers left the gymnasium at least 20 to 25 minutes before you did, that you saw them outside the gym around that time later, 20 to 25 minutes later?
25, 30 minutes, yes.
Now, as it relates to this the part where you take off running, do you recall Mr. Eckstein yesterday asking you about what made you fall?
Yes, I do.
I believe he specifically asked you if you slipped.
Yes, sir.
And I believe your response to that was no, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this question. Did you falling have anything to do with the fact that you were being chased, Mr. Hood?
Yes.
Were you walking away from the door or were you running away from the door?
Sprinting.
You weren't out for just a jog.
I was running for my life.
Now, you were asked some questions about where Sharika Sharad, your friend, was at the point in which you started running. Do you recall being asked those questions yesterday?
Repeat the question.
Sure. You were asked some questions by defense about, at the point in which you take off running, where Sharika Sharad was.
Yes.
Okay. And I believe Mr. Eckstein showed you an excerpt of your interview yesterday with Detective Santos from January 25th, 2015. So my question is going to be related to that, and if after I finish my question you want to see the transcript, I can provide that to you, okay?
Yes, sir.
Detective Santos asked you, do you remember seeing where Sharika was at this context when you started running? Do you remember what you told him?
I didn't see her.
Let me ask you this. Do you remember when you started running, whether or not you could see Sharika Sharad at all?
No, I couldn't see her at all.
Were you looking for Sharika Sharad at all?
Sadly, no.
Can you come in here and tell this jury that during the point in which you ran from the door up into the point that you woke up from being knocked out, that you were at all looking for Sharika Sharad?
No.
So you have no idea where Sharika Sharad was at that point?
No.
Mr. Hood, there were some questions yesterday on cross-examination regarding a term called a confrontation call. Do you remember being asked those questions?
Yes, sir.
And specifically, you were asked a question about, did you have a confrontation call with Thomasine Morris, and I believe also calls with Alonzo Hickerson?
Yes, I remember.
My question to you was the idea to try and do a confrontation call, was that your idea or was that the idea of Phoenix Police?
It never crossed my mind. First time I did it, first time I ever heard of it. So no, sir, it was not my idea.
And during the course of this case, Mr. Hood, were you trying to comply with Phoenix Police's requests of you?
It's obvious. I complied with everything. I actually think I went above and beyond.
Let me ask you this. Did you take being a victim in this case serious?
I took it very serious.
Did you, during the course of this, as this case unfolded, did you ever feel fear of retaliation? Let me rephrase that question. Did you ever fear of retaliation for going to the police in this case?
I bought me a pistol, yes.
Now, there was discussion about the fact that you had almost immediately after this occurred tried to secure a lawyer for yourself. Do you remember being asked those questions?
It wasn't immediately. Yeah, I remember.
But within the days following this, is it fair to say you made some attempt to try and get someone at least into your corner? Is that fair to say?
Yes, I needed help, yes.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question based on what I think is your knowledge of yourself and then some of the defendants in this case. Between yourself and the Morris brothers, Mr. Hood, who do you think has more resources, you or them? And let me rephrase that question. In Phoenix at the time of this offense, who had more resources in Phoenix in January 24, 2015 in this city?
Do you mean financial resources? Or could you be more?
I can clarify.
Thank you.
Let's start with financial resources.
Yes.
And my question was either you or them, sir.
Them.
In terms of family members, now I'm only asking about you. Did you have any family members living in the state of Arizona or within Phoenix at the time you were assaulted?
No, all of my family's on the East Coast and down south. Virginia, to be exact.
Did you have a lot of close friends in the Phoenix area after you had been assaulted?
I was here for 4 months. I had absolutely no friends here.
Now, you've testified that Alonzo Hickerson was both a friend of yours and a mentor of yours. Are those fair words to characterize the relationship?
I look up to him as a mentor.
And he is your friend?
Yes.
Alonzo Hickerson did not live in Phoenix around this time, is that correct?
He's never lived in Phoenix.
But he was, as far as you knew, in Phoenix the weekend of January 24, 2015.
Yes.
And after you woke up, after the assault, and you got into Ms. Sherrod's car, let me ask you this, were you upset at all about what had happened?
It's still hard for me to put into words how I felt after I woke up. I mean, it was, as all of you guys know, I mean, I'm from North Philly, tough area. I've been blessed to live in a suburb of Philadelphia for the past 13 years prior to me moving to Arizona. And I've never been so scared in my life. I've seen things, I've witnessed things, but how I felt getting attacked by people at one point I loved, I mean, you know, even being here today is hard, you know, just having to be in the same room with them.
Can you explain, Mr. Hood, to this jury why you would want to talk to someone you considered a friend in Phoenix after getting beat up? Why did you want to, regardless of whether it was you that called Alonzo or Alonzo that called you, why did you want to talk to him after you got beat up?
I mean, really, he was the only one I had here, I mean, that I knew personally. And, you know, when he called me, he was like, yo, like, are you okay? Like, they told me what happened to you, so you know, it was comforting for me.
Now, there was a discussion yesterday on cross-examination about some text messages that had been sent between you and Mr. Hickerson, Alonzo Hickerson, around this event that night and the next day. Do you remember being asked some of those questions?
Yes.
Now, is it true that Mr. Hickerson provided you with the names of potential people who might have seen what happened to you, such as the coaches, or that there were other witnesses out there? Did he tell you potentially that there were witnesses out there?
He told me, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My question to you, Mr. Hood, is did you ever tell Alonzo to tell people to lie for you?
There's no need. No.
Did you ever tell witnesses yourself, meaning people you thought were there that night, whether you saw them that night or found out after the fact? Did you tell them to lie for you, Mr. Hood?
There's nobody to tell. I didn't know anyone.
We talked about, in terms of the case progression, your contacts with police. Is it true, Mr. Hood, that you allowed police to search into your phone? And let me clarify this question, Mr. Hood. At some point during the investigation, did the case detective, Detective Santos, ask you whether he could retrieve some evidence from your phone? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you could have said no at that point. Did Detective Santos threaten you or in any way?
No, he didn't push me at all, no.
In that After that occurred, you provided your phone to the police department. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
And it's fair to say, Mr. Hood, that the reason why we're looking at some of the things we're looking at, the text messages that we asked about yesterday, or your call logs, is because you made the decision to at least give the police access to your phone in some form or fashion. Is that correct?
I thought it would be right to give them anything they asked for of me, yes.
Now, Mr. Hood, would you disagree with me with the fact that you were interviewed by Detective Santos on January 25th, 26th, and then a couple days later again? Does that sound about right to you?
Yes, that's about right.
And I believe you've clarified it, but it was not in the first interview where you told Detective Santos that you could not be sure that Marquise Morris ever hit or kicked you. Is that right?
Yes.
Your first interview with police indicated that you believed he had hit or kicked you?
Yes.
And you believed he was involved?
Yes.
Both?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And does it sound correct, Mr. Hood, that, and I can show you the transcripts, but that it was on January 26th, what would have been the third interview with Detective Santos, in which you told Detective Santos that you could not be sure that Marquise had ever hit or kicked you? Does that sound correct, sir?
Yes, I didn't lie. I just wanted to change the statement that I made.
Can you say that again, sir? I didn't hear that.
I said I didn't want to lie. I just changed the statement that I made.
And can you explain what, between the 24th and then the 25th, so that's about 2 days afterwards, what had changed in terms of why you felt the need to correct that statement? Was it your recollection? What made you change that statement?
Pretty much my recollection. I mean, it's odd, being here right now. It's very uncomfortable, and oddly, I'm sure it's uncomfortable for them as well. So I would never want to, lie on anyone, especially something to that magnitude. So
Now, to be clear, your testimony is not that Marquise wasn't there. He was there, correct?
no, yeah, he was there for sure.
In your testimony, he was within the fray, meaning within the area where this was occurring,
Yes,
and you saw him.
yes.
I want to approach Mr. Hood with exhibit, I believe it is, hold on a second, Judge. 180.
Oh, it's on you. The transcript's open.
Mr. Hood, I'm going to come up there because this exhibit has a lot of attachments and I don't want to get it. I thought I should. I'm going to draw your attention, Mr. Hood, to the January 26th, 2015 interview, page 21. And my questions are going to be relating to that, sir, so grab the rest of this and I'm going to give you your space. Now, do you remember on cross-examination yesterday, being asked by, I believe it was Mr. Eckstein, whether during this interview, the interview on the 26th, you were receiving calls from your attorney?
Yes.
Okay, and the page I've directed you to, page 21 of that, and maybe the page in front of that, document the time in which you had received a call from your attorney and the interview stopped. Is that fair? And looking at those 2 pages, am I in the right part of the interview, the context of that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, give me 1 second, Mr. Hood. Now, once you took a break from the call, you got back to the interview. In reviewing that transcript, is your recollection that then the interview continued? You didn't stop after receiving that call, correct?
Correct.
And after receiving that call, Detective Santos asked you a question. After you said, and if you can review your statement on 21, I believe it says, "Sorry for that delay." Do you see where I'm saying that? Or see where I am looking at on page 21, towards the bottom of that page? Next to me?
Yes, I see
Okay.
it, yes.
After that, Detective Santos asked you a question, correct?
Yes.
He asked you about, now you were turning to the last guy in terms of the group of individuals you were talking about, the last one of the defendants.
Yes, sir.
And then at that point, the discussion turns to Markeith.
Yes.
Okay. And it was at that time in the discussion, in the interview relating to that Detective Santos was giving you, that the topic of Markeith came up. And that was during a question and answer regarding all of the subjects, but specifically, the detective was inquiring about Markeith's affiliation in this, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it is at that time that you told Detective Santos that you couldn't be sure that Markeith had ever hit or kicked you, is that right?
Yes.
And we've said it 3 or 4 times, and I just want to make sure this is clear. That is your testimony in court, is you can't ever be sure of that.
Yes.
Mr. Hood, did correcting that statement have anything to do with other people telling you to do that, or did you decide to do that?
It had everything to do with me. The easiest thing for me to do would be to tell a lie.
In terms of, let me flip this so I don't. You have that part of it up there, Mr. Hood. I can approach it. Transcript. I want to talk a little bit, Mr. Hood, about what it is that you do for a living, because we talked some about that in direct, but that subject came up in cross-examination. Fair to say that you work with a lot of both college and high school prospects in the line of work that you do.
Yes.
And generally for the jury, Mr. Hood, can you explain what that process is, how you go about your business, give them an idea, a look into what your world is in terms of that work, how that all works?
Well, for me, being where I am now, instead of courting, you become courted. And, I have people who seek my services and want to be a part of what I have going. And, currently I work with and manage and have done marketing and endorsement deals for 2 current NBA players. I work with 9 current players playing in the top leagues in Europe and Asia currently today. So to say that these 2 was a meal ticket for me, I mean, it's inaccurate and it's false.
And one of the things, and I believe we talked about this person yesterday when we were showing your text messages, one of those individuals that you were texting in the weeks after this event was Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, is that right?
Yes.
And he is a professional basketball player, is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a professional relationship with that individual?
Yes.
Okay. Do you also have a personal relationship with that individual?
Yes.
And would you classify Mr. Hollis-Jefferson as a successful basketball player?
It's a great young man, yes.
Was during the course of your work doing the business that you do, were the Morris brothers the only professional athletes that you ever worked with?
No.
And I want to go back to something you said earlier, just to clarify, when we were speaking about Markeith and why it was that you said to the detectives you couldn't be sure that he ever hit or kicked you. You said something like, it would be the easiest thing to say a lie in that situation. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
You have to remember a lie. You don't have to remember the truth.
So jumping back to your work, and fair to say that in the somewhat cutthroat business, I think it was brought up yesterday, of trying to do what you do, trying to get prospects, to get professional contracts, being the NBA in Europe, that the Twins were not your lottery ticket. Is that true or false?
Everybody in every case is different. For me, I've helped dozens of kids who have absolutely no chance of getting a dime from playing anywhere after high school. And God willing, they'll have an opportunity to play college ball. And that's just as, or more important for me, to help kids who won't have a chance. So to just, categorize me as somebody who works with professional players, that's true. But it's a blessing to be able to help guide young men through basketball and also get paid at the same time. So for me, it's a blessing.
Right. And part of my question, and maybe I wasn't clear, is the Twins weren't the only individuals that you formed relationships when they were younger or even in college and helped transition to professional basketball. For example, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, that's one of those individuals, correct?
Yes.
And I guess the scope or the frame of my question is, this wasn't your one shot to help guys try and get to the NBA, the Morris twins.
No.
Okay.
Never looked at them like that.
Let me ask you this. After this incident, did you face pressure or resistance within your professional capacity? Did this impact your work?
Yes, I've lost 3 current NBA players due to me being plastered in the news, and it's definitely had a negative impact on my life overall.
I would object to this as going beyond the scope of direct and cross.
Can you approach, please? The objection is overruled.
So the decision, Mr. Hood, so I'm clear, to go to the police to be a victim in this case, you encountered hurdles because of that after the fact, in your professional capacity, to say the least.
Yes. To say the least. Yes.
There was some discussion yesterday about your statements regarding Mr. Kane and when he took his sweater off and when he was in a t-shirt. Do you remember being asked questions about that by Mr. Eckstein?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Eckstein had you read from your January 25th transcript. I'm going to ask the coach with that transcript. I want you to exhibit 180 for the record. Mr. Hood, I'm going to refer you to page 15 on that transcript, sir.
I'm here.
And there's to give you direction, there's a large section in the middle of that page that is your statement. Do you see that? It begins with "so 50 seconds," that part.
Yes, sir.
In the middle of that paragraph, I want you to review what it is that you said regarding seeing Julius Kane and his description. Then I have a question for you, sir. Sure, it is January 25th, 15.
Yes.
Okay. So in that paragraph, there are statements that Mr. Eckstein asked you about, and I'm going to give you the context of the sentence, where you had indicated he had a brown and gold sweater, he took it off and had on a white t-shirt. Did you say that during that interview?
I remember that, yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this specifically. You saw Julius Kane inside the gymnasium. What was he wearing?
He was wearing a brown or gold type of sweater.
And in the interview there, you indicated he took it off. Did you specifically see Julius Kane ever take off his sweater?
No.
When you saw him outside, what was he wearing?
A white t-shirt.
Okay. So can you explain what you meant by he took it off?
Just meaning when I saw him in the gym, he had on a sweater. When I seen him outside, he had on a t-shirt. So evidently, he took off his sweater. Meaning that he not necessarily changed his identity because I knew who he was, but I've never physically seen him take off his sweater that he had on in the gym prior to me walking out the door.
So you were inferring that because he had he was in different clothes that he must have taken the sweater off?
Absolutely, yes.
Now, there were some questions about your initial statements to police, the patrol officer, when you got to the hospital. And I believe your response in cross-examination was you didn't remember that very much.
Yeah, I vaguely remember him. When he came in, honestly, I remember being wheelchaired back there. The only cop I ever remember talking to was Detective Santo. I remember another dude being in a room and somebody taking photos of my cell phone between the text messages between me and Miss Angel. But I vaguely remember talking to another cop.
That initial officer you spoke to, that was not long after the assault had occurred, correct?
Nah, I couldn't have been in the back. Well, I was in a wheelchair maybe for about 5-7 minutes prior to me getting the bed in there. And I want to say they came in there maybe 5 minutes after that, so maybe 12 minutes total to me being in the hospital. Give or take, I mean, I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't very.
Now, we talked a little bit about you, and I'm going to try and wrap up my questions with you, Mr. Hood, because I know you've been on the stand for quite a long time. In terms of when you were running, and we talked about you didn't slip, but you go to the ground. And is it fair at that point, the individuals that attacked you descended on you? Is that a fair characterization of that?
Yes.
When you fell on the ground, did you fall on your face and hit your nose when you hit the ground?
No.
Do you remember at all during the encounter, during the assault, anyone ever kicking you in the face?
Yes.
Do you know which individuals that was?
Marcus.
And there was a question asked by Mr. Eckstein yesterday as to how you could see individuals when you were on the ground. And I believe you had indicated you had your hands over your head. Were you covering your eyes at all during that?
No, I was like this, one arm on the ground, and I was like this. I mean, clearly I can, my visual isn't abstracted at all. Be hard to cover your eyes when you're trying to block hits from the head.
I'm going to approach the witness with 221. I promise, Mr. Hood, I do not have a ton of questions on Exhibit 221, but and I believe 221 was admitted. Is that correct, Judge?
Yeah, I remember saying that.
Yes.
221, Mr. Hood, is a 7-page document. Is that right? And my next question is going to be, all of those documents were shown to you and have your signature on the bottom of them?
Yes, sir.
You want it up? Turn the lights down?
Yes, please, Judge. Now, in terms of the questions yesterday, and I believe you will remember these, where Mr. Bellinger was asking you about an instance during an interview where there was some tapping going on. Do you remember being asked that question yesterday?
Yes.
Okay. Specifically, he was asking whether in any of these maps, which I'm going to go through them, Mr. Hood, fair to say these are all different Google Earth images of the arts facility?
Yes, sir.
And these were shown to you during some of the interview, or at least in one of the interviews with Detective Santos.
Yes, sir.
And specifically, Mr. Bellinger was asking you questions about, did you ever mark down where Markeith was in any of these maps? Do you remember being asked those questions?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the interview that day, and I can provide it to you if need be, did Detective Santos ever ask you to mark down where Markeith was on those maps?
No.
And at that point, when you're talking with Detective Santos, who's asking the questions, you or him?
Detective Santos.
So, in the recording where it indicates you tapping down where Markeith was, you did what the detective asked you to do there, to point out where Markeith was.
He never asked me where Markeith was.
He never asked you where Markeith was. So let me get you the transcript, sir, because we're going to go through some of that, because I know there was confusion about what you marked, what you didn't mark. So. approach the witness again with exhibit
180? Yes.
I see that, thank you, Jim. If you could review 23 into 24, the portion of the transcript that indicates the tapping sound.
Going up here.
No, you can start down at the bottom of 23 here. Let me know when you're done, Mr. Hood. I'll
Done.
answer the question. Okay. So, and let me preface this by there is not a right or wrong answer here. I'm just asking for your best. I wasn't at the interview, and I believe Mr. Bellinger was asking questions to indicate who was initiating the tapping in that audio recording. So, my question to you is, do you think in reviewing exhibits 23 and 24, where the detective asked you to show you where Markeith was during this, and then you indicate, and it's on page 24, yeah, I would say Keith was more back here, tapping sound. Do you have any recollection whether that was you tapping anything, or did you just point somewhere?
No, I don't remember me tapping anywhere.
Okay. But your indication is that Markeith was, as you would say, within the fray, within the area at that point.
Yes, sir.
Read that particular portion of the transcript. Next, 4 lines complete.
All right, under the rule of completeness, can you please, you want him to read to the bottom of the,
Yeah, I wanted to read what you just
Oh,
read. I'm
okay.
sorry, Ron.
to the bottom of the page?
No, from inaudible down to Eric Good saying right.
Okay, so could you just finish reading the portion of the page?
Sure. You want me to read it all?
Mr. Hood to read it to himself.
Okay.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Hood, so after you, to give you context again, you indicated that say Keith was more back here, and then there's that tapping sound we discussed. And then Detective Santos asked you, okay, that's quite a ways, and what was your response?
Quite a distance, right?
The next part, we're not going to go through the transcript anymore, but the next part in that interview, did you indicate to Detective Santos, again, that you couldn't be sure that Markeith ever hit or kicked you?
Yes.
That was pretty much immediately after that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So at this point, fair to say that you were trying to be as truthful as you could in terms of what you recall from that night.
Yes.
And was there at any point in your interviews with police, and I understand your testimony regarding the first one is you do not have much of a recollection of the patrol officer interview, is that correct?
Yes.
Was there at any point in the interviews with police during the pendency of this case where you attempted to provide them with anything but your truthful recollection of that night?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Hood, I believe I'm almost done. I just want to check my notes one time. If I get a moment.
Yes? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn the lights back on.
I definitely bring out that Thomasine. A few more questions, and we had talked about a subject about texts to individuals named Rondae, and then I believe there was another text to an individual who you said was someone in Silicon Valley. You remember what that individual's name was we were talking about yesterday?
Yes.
Who was that?
His name is Mr. Rudy Thomas.
Okay. Now, the defense showed you some text regarding dollar signs and making them pay, and there was a discussion yesterday about making the twins pay. My question to you, sir, is, like specifically with Mr. Hollis-Jefferson and some of the text, and I'm going to give you your phone records to review in a minute on 184, when those texts occurred. So some of those texts we covered yesterday. I'm going to approach with this, and I'm trying to get a context as to when you sent texts like that in relation to the assault. I can approach with 184.
You may.
Judge, I grabbed the wrong zip that is assault.
Your Honor, one of the questions is to elicit testimony regarding when these visitor texts were sent, but I think these questions were all asked and answered yesterday.
And to correct the record, it is 185 and I'm approaching the witness with. Reviewing this, Mr. Hood, my questions are the text. Would it be a fair assessment that the text to individuals such as Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and some of the people you talked about with dollar signs, those occurred over 2 weeks after the assault?
I've been a month and a day afterwards.
You had already talked to police 4 times by the conclusion of January, so within a week of that assault, correct?
Yes.
You indicated yesterday that you wanted to see, and I'm done with the text messages, sir, that you wanted to see the twins pay. You
Absolutely.
explained what that was yesterday.
Yes,
Okay. Part of that, and you tell me, did you want to see them held responsible for their part in what they did to you?
yes,
Okay. You had indicated that you felt a pain when you were kicked by Marcus Morris. Is that correct?
all of them, yes,
Okay. But specifically in terms of in your face?
yes,
Okay. And I want to be clear because we've been talking about the different versions you gave in terms of Markeef's involvement. Is there any doubt in your mind that Markeef was around during the assault, meaning you could see him?
no doubt, no.
And do you believe that all of the individuals that came in that day were involved in what happened to you?
We wouldn't be here today if they weren't, yes.
Do you have any independent beef that you are aware of whatsoever with Julius King?
We have nothing in common.
And I don't know if you said beef. Beef might have been a word I just threw out at you. What I meant by that was any problem, any issue with Julius King.
We never exchanged words, we had nothing in common, except that we had a relationship with the twins.
And my last question, I think, Mr. Hood, to you is, after this assault, fair to say you had received both either text or phone calls from Thomasine trying to contact you after this assault. Is that fair? Thomasine Morris.
After the attack? I don't remember.
Okay.
Yes. Yes,
So if
sir.
you want to review your text, you can do that, sir.
Yes, can I review my text, please?
Go ahead.
Yes,
You did?
yes. She tried to contact me, yes.
How long after the attack? Couple days?
No, I want to say that night and the next day.
Your Honor, I would ask if you could point to a specific text to confirm the time he's just given for this. Obviously, he's referring to some particular documents.
Counsel, if you would like to show Mr. Eckstein the document that he was using to refresh his recollection, you may do so.
Do you have the photos of the,
He's refreshing his recollection of the text message.
thank you.
Mr. Hood, to be clear in terms of what your answer was, did you look at the text messages there to answer that question, or are you going off your recollection?
I'm going off my memory.
So overall,
I'm going to approach with some screenshot images. Again, these have been admitted through Exhibit 61 through 65. Do you recognize what these are, Mr. Hood?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you receive a text from Thomasine Morris on January 26th of 2015?
Yes, I see the 25th and the 26th, yes.
On the 26th, can you tell the jury what it was she asked you? In reviewing that statement.
She says, hey, you mad at me? What did I do to you?
And so to correct the record, Mr. Hood, it wasn't the day after, it was 2 days after. The 26th is 2 days after the 24th, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I don't have any further questions for the witness, Judge.
any questions of the jury? No? Counsel, would you please approach? How soon did you receive your phone back from police after submitting it to them?
I was right there. I went down to Second and Washington. I sat there, watched them plug it up, I was there for the whole thing. So as soon as the process was done, they gave me the phone right back.
Will you please describe how Mr. Bowman wore the bandana on the night of the alleged altercation?
Inside of the gym, it was around his head, kind of like that, maybe tied to the back.
And for the record, Mr. Hood was showing that it was at approximately his hairline above his ears. Is that a fair description?
Yes, like above the eyebrow, like that.
We heard a lot about text messages being given to the police. Were your emails and social media also turned over to police?
I believe everything. I'm not sure. All I know is that my phone calls, dial outs, incoming calls, websites, pit photos. From all I know, my entire phone was dumped. I don't know to the extent. All I was told was that all of my phone calls, all of my text messages, and all of my photos were abstracted from my phone when I gave it to the detectives.
Were you assessed for, diagnosed with, or treated for a concussion while at the hospital on the night of the assault?
Yes.
Now, that asks a number of things, so I'm going to go back and ask them one at a time. Were you assessed for a concussion while at the hospital on the night of the assault?
Yes.
Were you diagnosed with a concussion while at the hospital on the night of the assault?
Yes.
Were you treated for a concussion while at the hospital on the night of the assault?
Yes.
Were you aware that the twins were in town so that when you asked Ms. Morris what she was doing and she responded, kicking it with the boys, that you knew the twins, let me go back and start again. Were you aware that the twins were in town so that when you asked Ms. Morris what she was doing and she said, kicking it with the boys, that you knew it was the twins and not her other sons?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher, any follow-up to the questions?
There's no follow-up from the state judge.
Mr. Eckstein? Mr. Ballinger?
Mr. Hood, you were asked by the state to turn over any medical records regarding any injuries that you had, weren't you?
Yes.
And there are no medical records that show that you had a concussion that night, are there?
False.
Do you have that record? Do we have that record available to us today?
You should, yes.
Judge, the nature of the question is argumentative. This is not a witness in which all of the evidence came in through. So if he has an issue with evidence that is marked and not admitted.
Approach, please. Hood, could you return to the stand for me? Thank you. All rise for the jury. Please be seated. We are back on the record in CR 2015-001671-001, 003, and 004. State of Arizona versus Gerald Bowman, Marcus Morris, and Markeith Morris. We're back in the presence of the jury. All counsel and all defendants are present. Mr. Hood is back on the stand and still under oath. Ladies and gentlemen, I did receive an additional question, so I'm going to interrupt Mr. Ballinger's questioning, and I'm going to ask this question, then I'm going to turn it back over to the state to determine if the state has any follow-up, and then we'll resume with the questioning of Mr. Ballinger. Mr. Hood, do you have a civil suit against all 5 people who assaulted you, or just the twins?
All 5.
Mr. Fisher, do you have any follow-up?
Did you file your civil suit under the advice of your civil attorneys in that case?
Yes.
No further follow-up.
Mr. Ballinger, any follow-up on any of the earlier questions or this question?
Yeah, yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hood, on the evening of January 24th, 2015, after the altercation, you were treated at Phoenix Baptist Hospital, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the medical records, which for identification purposes is Exhibit 232, the medical records show that your diagnosis that evening was for a fractured nose, multiple contusions, and multiple abrasions. There was no diagnosis of a concussion. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know what I was diagnosed with.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
I'm showing you page 3 of 14 of exhibit number 232 for purposes of refreshing your recollection, Mr. Hood. And do you see where it says impression and plan diagnosis?
It says what?
I'm sorry, impression and plan diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
Does that refresh your recollection that there was no diagnosis of a concussion that evening?
I don't remember.
You were prescribed ibuprofen that evening. Do you remember that?
No, sir.
No further questions.
Mr. Eckstein, any follow-up?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hood, as to the civil suit, you indicated you believe it's against all 5 of the individuals who you say assaulted you, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Do you know if you have judgments against any of the individuals, any of those 5 people already?
I wouldn't have any type of information on that.
Do you understand that fault can be apportioned so that any individual, one of those 5 individuals, would have to pay whatever the entire amount that's assessed in terms of your damages are, right?
I would object outside the scope of the juror question at this point.
Overruled. You may answer, if you know.
I have no information on any of that.
You just don't know.
That's why you hire people like yourself to do that job. I don't know.
Nothing further.
Mr. Lackey, any follow-up?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Fisher? Any? And calls? Mr. Fisher, any follow-up?
Mr. Hood, as it relates to the question about the civil lawsuit, do you know all the legal aspects of that civil lawsuit, Mr. Hood?
I know nothing about it.
And you have separate attorneys, meaning civil attorneys for that lawsuit? Not me.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Hood, your response to Mr. Bellinger, and if I could just have 1 second with that.
I guess my
question to you, Mr. Hood, is you saw doctors that night, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you continue to see doctors after this assault?
Yeah, I'm seeing them now.
Okay. So as a result just so I'm clear, as a result of what occurred that night, you just didn't see your primary doctors, you had follow-up appointments as a result of that?
Yes, sir.
And do you have any reason to disagree? Well, I guess your testimony from Mr. Bellinger is you don't recall your diagnosis.
2.5 years ago, I wouldn't,
Okay, but your testimony in here is you believe you had a concussion?
yes.
No follow-up.
Any further questions of this witness from the jury? Thank you, Mr. Hood. You may step down. Watch your step.
Judge.
State's next witness, please.
Your Honor, the state would call Jacob Miller, accident.
Do you need something, Mr. Bellinger?
I just usually stand for witness.
Fine. Didn't know if you wanted to address me on an issue. Sir, if you would come forward toward me. I'm going to have you stand right in front of my clerk. She's wearing the peach-colored sweater to my left. Right there next to the box with the green tag, she's going to confirm the spelling of your name and administer an oath to you. Mr. Miller, if you can come around, my court reporter, be seated to my right. I'll go over a couple of rules with you. The one seated in front of you is typing up a word-for-word transcription of everything that is said here in the courtroom. All of your answers need to be verbal. You can't answer a question by shaking your head. Also, avoid saying mm-hmm or uh-uh. I'll interrupt you to make sure the record's clear that you're saying yes or no. Also, you may know where the lawyers or I are headed with our questions, but she can only type one person talking at a time. So you need to be patient and wait for the question to conclude before you begin answering. Mr. Fisher, your witness when you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. And Mr. Miller, I believe you have water up there during the course of this, so if you need to. Do you have cups up there?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you go ahead, sir, as I already pointed towards the water and now interrupting Matt. When you pour your cup of water, can you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Jacob Miller.
All right, Jacob, and tell me, what do you do for a living?
I'm an athletic director at a high school in Oklahoma City.
And back in 2015, what were you doing for a living?
I was the director of basketball at Westwind Prep.
In Westwind Prep, where is that at? Or where was that?
Located on Northern and 19th.
Within the city of Phoenix?
Yes, in Phoenix, yes, sorry.
And what did you do there again?
I was the director of basketball. I was the head coach for the postgraduate program.
I'm going to ask you to slow your answers down just a bit, please.
I speak fast, and that's only going to fuel you on, so I will try and speak slow if you can speak slow for the court reporter as well. And you indicated Westwind was located. Westwind is no longer a school over there?
Correct.
So back in 2015, I guess the academic year, which would have started in the fall of 2014 up until the spring of 2015, you were at Westwind.
Yes.
And what kind of, how many different teams were you coaching back then?
I was just coaching one at the time, but we had a high school team as well, but I had a coach for that.
Are you familiar with a facility known as the Arch facility?
Yes.
What is that?
That was our practice and home facility for Westwind. We didn't have facilities on campus, and we utilized the off-campus facility at the Arch.
And did you play games there sometimes, host tournaments there?
Yes.
And we're going to talk about some events surrounding January 24th of 2015. And I guess my question to you is, were you at the Arch that day?
Yes.
What were you doing at the Arch facility?
We were running a postgraduate classic. We had 8 teams come in over the South and the West Coast and came in for exposure and et cetera. So we had a tournament that weekend.
And what age group are the kids was your team playing in that tournament? Let me ask you that.
Yes. Yeah, we were.
How old were the kids on your team?
So they're postgraduate, so they're graduating seniors in high school, so it ranges between 18 and 19.
And do you recall, was this well, let me ask you a better question. If I can approach with Exhibit 219. Miller, if you could take a look at 219 and let me know if you think you recognize what 219 depicts.
Yes, I do.
What is that?
Satellite image of the facility,
The arch facility?
the arch facility, yes.
And we'll get back to the picture in a little bit in terms of the layout and things like that. But you indicated now you live in Oklahoma. You traveled from out of state to be here today, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And my office brought you here to testify in terms of your plane tickets to get here.
Yes.
And when are you supposed to be going back?
Flight's at 6:30.
Well, I will try and be as direct as I can in terms of questions with you, sir. Before we dive into the details of what you saw, if anything, that day, I have a open general question for you. Did you want to be part of this case at all whatsoever?
No, no, sir.
I know that's kind of, can you explain a little bit about that? I mean, if you can at all.
Well, the only reason why I was outside was because I thought that it was, kids fighting, an altercation with kids. So that's why, because I'm liable for the kids in my tournament or that are participating in my tournament.
So were you expecting on January 24th, 2015, so we're going to be asking a lot of questions about what you recall. Were you expecting a day like this where you had to come in front of a whole bunch of people to talk about what you remember?
No, not at all.
Okay. And I'm going to ask, as we go through questions, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues, the defense attorneys, but we're going to ask that, I assume, your best recollection of what you recall that day.
Yes.
And anyway, with that, we'll go forward onto the questions. So you indicated your team was there on January 24th, 2015. There were multiple teams playing, correct?
Yes.
Did your team play games that day?
Yes, there was 8 teams in the tournament. We had 4 games each day. So Friday was 4, Saturday was 4, and Sunday was 4. Now, where they played during that time, I'm not.
Now, at some point on January 24th, were there some other teams playing when you witnessed some professional athletes show up to the game? Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Was your team playing at that point?
No.
But you were hanging around the arch?
So I wasn't hanging around. I was running the event, so I had to be there and close it down.
Okay. So you were there till the last game was over, regardless of your team? Okay. I want to ask you about some individuals, whether you know these people. Do you know an individual by the name of Erik Bowman?
Know him.
You don't know him?
I don't know who Eric Bowman, like that runs Planet Athlete, Eric Bowman, or?
Correct.
Oh, yes, I do know him.
Okay. And was he affiliated with one of the basketball teams that was playing that night?
Yeah, Planet Athlete.
What about an individual by the name of Alonzo Hickerson? Do you know who that person is?
Yes, I do.
Was he affiliated with one of the teams?
Yes, Reno International Prep.
What about an individual by the name of Erik Hood?
I don't know who he is, outside of the reason why we're here.
So let me ask a better question. Before January 24th, 2015, you didn't really know Erik Hood at all?
Not at all.
Okay. But you did know Bowman and Hickerson through Planet
Correct.
Athlete in Reno?
Correct.
What about an individual by the name of like a Coach Greg. Do you know that individual?
Right.
Greg Wright.
Greg White?
Right.
Right, no.
Okay. And what about Marcus Morris? Do you know who that person is?
Yes. I mean, I don't know him, but I know who he is.
What do you know him as prior to January 24, 2015? Because you saw him on that day, correct?
Professional athlete.
Okay. And Markeith Morris, the same?
Professional athlete.
And were you aware on the January 24th that those individuals played for the Phoenix Suns at that point?
Yes.
Okay. What about an individual by the name of Julius Kane? Do you know who that is?
No, sir.
Christopher Melendez?
No.
And Gerald Bowman?
No.
Okay. In terms of, you spoke to the police a number of times after this incident, correct?
Yes.
More than you probably would have liked.
Yes.
Okay. In preparation for today's testimony, what have you reviewed, if anything?
Just a little bit of the transcripts you guys sent me.
And were those transcripts of what everyone said or what you said?
I've just read through them. I mean, just to reread it all.
And my question to you is, you were provided transcripts, were they of interviews with you being there, like transcripts of your interviews?
When? Like
Okay.
now or?
In terms of preparation for trial, you were sent some
Yes,
transcripts.
yes, I was sent transcripts, yes.
Were they transcripts of your interviews or?
Of the whole thing. They were of every, oh yeah, just of my interviews, all 4 or 5 of them.
And if I ask a question, sir, and it's confusing, I'll clarify it. But
Okay.
I think I have your answer. So now the games are going on the 24th, and you already indicated at some point you saw professional athletes walk in. Were those the 2 Morris brothers?
Yes.
All right. What do you recall about seeing them? Did you see them when they walked in the gym? Or tell me what you recall.
I was actually outside on the phone when they pulled up, talking to a coach, and just saw them pull in and come in the gym.
Do you remember when they pulled up, what kind of car they were in?
Yeah, it was a purple Bentley.
It was a what, sir?
Purple Bentley.
Okay. And you're outside the Arch facility, and I'm going to show you Exhibit 219. You were outside of the gymnasium when they pulled in?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
And do you have any memory in terms of looking at Exhibit 219? You said you saw them park and walk into the gym. Whereabouts did they park in that area?
No, I mean, it was just on this,
And sir, you can actually mark.
If you use the metal end and just be very purposeful, it will respond.
probably maybe in this area.
Well,
Right in front, on the other side of the blue awning, so where the picnic tables are in front of that.
And Mr. Miller, I'm going to have you actually go up behind the screen if you could just point it out, and I'll try to memorialize where it is you said.
It lives in this area.
Okay. And, all right, so you saw them park, you see them walk in, and for the record, you're talking about where it says parking lot, at the end of lot, that silver road that runs up and down, somewhere in that area.
Right.
And that's Exhibit 219. The two of them walk in, are any other people with them at that point?
Not that I recall. I don't remember anyone else walking with them.
Now, what did you do when you saw them walking into the gym? Did you talk to them?
No, I was on the phone.
Okay. At some point, do you go back into the gym?
Yes. I don't remember how long after, but yes, I did go back in.
And did you see the Morris brothers sitting inside the gymnasium?
Yes.
Did it appear that they were sitting with other individuals?
There was a crowd. There was people there, you know, up in the stands. So I couldn't tell you if they were sitting with someone or not.
Do you ever recall seeing a second car come in around the time of the Morris brothers?
No.
Okay.
is that car? Judge, could I have that question read back?
Treva, could you please read back the question and answer? Do you ever recall?
Do you ever recall seeing a second car coming around the time of the Morris brothers? Yes or no?
Laura and I might come back to that. So the game goes off. Were there any incidents inside the gym that you were aware of that drew your attention?
No, my job was to take the reps into their changing room, and we were just kind of sitting in there waiting on everyone to clear the facility.
And at some point, you end up going outside, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember what drew you outside?
A lady came in screaming frantically, there's a fight, there's a fight.
And where were you when the lady came in?
Inside as soon as you walk in, there's like a little glass room, and to the right, there's the office. And that's where where our reps changed.
And we've heard some testimony, and at the Arch facility, specifically the gymnasium, are there outside doors and then a second set of doors to get into the gym?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so.
And is the coach's office somewhere in between those?
It's in between there, yeah. And then there's the bathrooms across that little hallway there, entryway.
And Mr. Miller, I'm just going to remind you to wait for his question to conclude before you begin speaking.
And when you see the lady come in, you're in the coach's office area right there, is that right?
Yes.
And what do you do once she comes in?
Immediately, me and my assistant run out the doors to the patio area outside.
And what was it that she said caused you to go outside?
There's a fight. There's a fight.
And when you go outside, well, you said you went out with your assistant. Who is your assistant?
Mustafa Halal.
And at that point, do you go outside? I think you said yes.
Yes.
Does Mustafa Halal come with you?
Yes.
And when you go outside, what do you see?
I look around. There's nothing there at the immediate point. I look to my left, and there was one Morris brother was at the corner, kind of in this area, maybe over here, this lot. And I was in the gazebo or the picnic area, and I hollered, I yelled, "Morris, what's going on?" And he looked, and then he kind of trotted down the road.
Okay, so. And I'm going to try one more time just because we're going to be talking about this diagram. Can you try and mark one more time with the green emblem and see if it works where you saw the one Morris brother?
You know what, we're going to take a break for a few minutes. I'm going to bring someone down for this. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a few minutes break just so that I can have technology come down and restart our system rather than having you wait. Mel, would you please email someone immediately? And Mr. Lackey, I'm going to email Judge Kemp too. I'm going to email anyone who may be involved. So. Oh, I didn't tell you what we were talking about, did I?
No, because everything.
I can get the information.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated. We are back on the record in CR 2015-001671-001, 002, and 001, 003, and 004. State of Arizona versus Gerald Bowman, Marcus Morris, and Markeith Morris. We are back in the presence of the jury. All counsel and all defendants are present. Mr. Miller is back on the stand and still under oath. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to ask you a question before we go back to the questioning of Mr. Miller. Sometimes jurors inadvertently encounter something in the media. Sometimes they inadvertently encounter something in a communication with individuals that are even within our own courthouse. Is there anyone who believes that they have overheard anything that will prevent them from being a fair and impartial juror in this case? Would you please indicate so by raising your hand? For the record, there are no hands that were raised. Is there anyone who would be unable to disregard anything that you may have heard or encountered about this case in and around the courthouse to date? Would you please raise your hand now? For the record, there are no hands, and of course, that's anything said outside the courtroom. And ladies and gentlemen, by a show of hands, so hopefully I will see all of your hands raised. By a show of hands, is there anyone who is willing to bring to my attention anything that you may inadvertently or purposefully encounter in the media or in interactions with any other person regarding this case outside the courtroom? Are you willing to follow that instruction and bring that to my attention? Please raise your hand. And each juror has indicated a willingness to comply with the court order. Mr. Fisher, our technology is back up and running. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for the delay.
Get back to, we're going to move to the exhibit because now we have to use it because the screen is working, but we were going to use it anyway. But I do have a question I wanted to clarify with you. As you indicated, you recalled talking to police on a number of occasions about what you saw that day.
Yes.
And earlier I asked you about whether you recall when the Morris brothers pulled up in their car, whether you recall another car pulling up with any individuals. And I believe your response was you don't recall, is that right?
I don't remember that.
Would reviewing your statements to law enforcement regarding that question help to refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. Can I approach with Exhibit 177?
Yes.
I'm going to direct you to page 8, Mr. Miller, with Exhibit 177. And for purposes of when I'm going to have you read just the bottom part of page 8. When you're done reading this, just look up so then I know, and then I'll ask the question again. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you thought he said that.
Did you get an opportunity to review page 8?
Yes.
And does that refresh your recollection as to whether or not you had seen a second car that night?
No, I mean, sitting here now, I don't remember a second car coming up, but
Okay.
that was 2.5 years ago, but I will stand by what I said on this date, so.
Okay. I guess my question to you then, Mr. Miller, is when you talk to the police on all the time, so I think it was 3 different times, were you being truthful in your responses to police about what you saw?
To my best ability, yes, I was.
Okay. And with the information you provided to law enforcement, then do you believe it would be more accurate then than now, or the same all the way through?
I would say it would be more accurate then because it was at the time.
Okay. And I guess I'll ask you the question. You said you believe that your statement then was more accurate than now. What did you say in reviewing that exhibit? What did you say to police in terms of your recollection of the car?
The second car did.
Your Honor,
I didn't hear you.
and that's improper. He said he looked at the document, his recollection.
Why don't you folks approach for a second?
You had indicated, looking at that didn't refresh your recollection, but you would stand by what you said back then to law enforcement. Is that correct? So my question to you is, looking now to the exhibit I showed you on page 8, can you read in your response? Let me give you a frame of reference here, so it's not the entire thing. All right, at page 8, the bottom, and I'll point to you, Mr. Miller, that section I want you to right here. Can you please read in what it was you reported to police that day, that section?
They walked out by themselves as well. That's what I mean. They were together, but they were in two different cars that pulled up. They drove a Bentley themselves and another car pulled up with them and parked on, there's nothing there. When I was on the phone, I didn't even know where together until, I didn't know they were together until they walked in. The twins were here in the corner and the other 3 guys were on the.
And that dialogue is a question and answer between you and the detectives.
Correct.
So now turning away from the transcript, Mr. Miller, I want to go back to the point we were at when we reset all the computers and technology. You had indicated you walked outside and you saw a Morris brother. And my question to you was if you could show them the diagram where you saw that Morris brother.
Yeah, so he was about right here on this kind of like curve.
Okay. And can you show, maybe with a circle, Mr. Miller, best you recall, where the doors you would have come out at are located? So where were you walking out of? Okay.
And Mr. Fisher, if you want, you can also change the color if you need different things depicted.
We had a whole bunch of this. We're going to figure out how to change the color together. Mr. Miller, how to do that. But, so you walk out, you see a Morris brother standing there, and you said, well, what did you say to him? Because I don't want to paraphrase.
I yelled Morris, and he kind of looked over his shoulder, and I said, "What's going on?"
So let me ask you a question. Can you tell the Morris brothers apart at all?
Negative, not at all.
Okay. When you do that, when you yell out to him, are there a lot of people that you saw in the parking lot, or do you recall?
I don't really recall that. I kind of was just trying to find the fight.
Were you expecting, based on what the female came in, when you walked out to see the fight, like right when you walked out?
Yes.
And so you see the Morris brother there, and you said when you yelled at him, he turned and faced you. Do you remember what direction that brother was facing?
When he was facing, looking down the drive.
Okay.
And then when I came out to the end about right here, because I came out of the patio to the end of the concrete there, that's when he looked at me because I yelled Morris.
And Judge, can I go ahead and freeze this because I'm going to zoom out?
Yes. Do you have it frozen? Is it printed?
Mr. Miller, to be clear, as this will wait to print before I zoom out, when you indicate he was looking down, was he looking down the drive towards underneath the field area? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, he was looking down that drive.
Can you unfreeze?
Are we good? I think.
Would you like that marked?
Yes, Judge, please. All right, Mr. Miller, so you yelled at him. You said he turned from the position he was in before and looked at you, and then what did that Morris brother do after he turned and looked at you?
Lightly jogged down the drive,
Okay, and what did you do at that point?
followed behind.
And as far as you know, Mustafa's with you at this point?
Yes, I really don't recall him being with me until we got down to the end of the drive.
But it was you that yelled out to the Morris brothers, not Mustafa.
Correct.
And we already indicated you can't identify them. Did that person, whichever of the Morris brothers it was, did he say anything back to you before he started running down?
No.
Okay. So you start to head down towards the drive. Let me ask you this. Based on your recollection, were you just at that point following him, or did you have any reason to think whatever the disturbance was down there? What made you
I was just,
follow?
oh, sorry. I was just following because I thought that would be where the situation was. And like I said, I was just, wanted to make sure it wasn't a player that was in the event.
And is it fair for me to say that, other than the information provided to you by the female, when you come out and you said you saw the one Morris brother, you don't see any fight going on in the
I don't see anything. Correct, that's right.
in the immediate vicinity? You can't see anything that looks like a fight to you at that point?
Correct.
So you follow down the Morris brother. Where is it that, how far down do you go before the next thing happens in terms of what you recall of this situation?
To the end, to the end of the drive. I don't know what crossroad that is there, but at the end of this driveway, where it says gate, would probably, oh yeah. Yeah, so Coulter, so probably, we stopped about right here in this vicinity.
And at some point, as you're going up, or you're following one of the Morris brothers at that point, you make it all the way down close to where you've marked on exhibit 219. Do you have a conversation, or do you interact with the Morris brother at all? Or what do you do when you get down there? You just stand there?
No, so when we got down there, the first thing I said is, what's going on, trying to see if it was players. And by that time I could see it wasn't, and one of them told me that it's nothing's going on here. And I said, it looks like something's going on. I just want to make sure there's no kids that are fighting. They said, it's not kids. And I said, perfect. And then during that interchange, it was kind of like we just all turned and walked back up.
Okay. Let's kind of unpack what you can recall about this. The interaction you had, because it sounds to me like you're following one of the Morris brothers down there.
Yes?
Yes.
The conversation you have, is it with the Morris brother you've been following?
It was just a general statement out loud. And to be honest with you, I can't remember who answered back to me.
Well, then let me ask you this question. When you get all the way down there, was the other Morris brother down there?
Yes.
And do you recall any other people besides yourself and the two Morris brothers being down at the gate?
And then Mustafa behind me, my assistant, once we got there, I saw him, and then there was the individuals were down more on the curb, like right on the curb.
Maybe
They
it's
were more down there. I mean, we weren't right, when we came up, we didn't come right on top of them and see everything. We were probably 15, 20 feet back.
And let me ask you this question up front. Based on your recollection, do you remember seeing anyone hitting or kicking anyone that night?
I mean, you could just tell it was a scuffle, and it was dark. On that corner, there's no street light, so it was pitch black down there on that corner. But you could just tell, and you could hear that but I couldn't see, you could definitely tell it was an altercation.
So we've identified you, Mustafa, coming down there, the Morris brother that was already down there, and the one that you followed down. It sounds to me like that circle, you're marking that there were some other individuals that I haven't already mentioned.
There had to have been some down there, yeah, already. And obviously, one was Mr. Hood, who was laying there. When we all walked back up, he was still laying there.
So when you had the interaction with one of the two Morris brothers, or both of them, was it just one or?
No, so when we got down there, the one was where we were, 15 or 20. I mean, he wasn't down in the, in the altercation. He was away as well. When we came up on that, there was, it was him and then Mustafa and myself, and then whichever one was running down there.
And so I'm just trying to, and maybe I'm not asking the best question, I'm just trying to be clear and we can move forward from it. You're following a Morris brother down there, and you can't see where he's going or what's going on down there, correct?
I mean, I could see there was individuals down there, but I didn't know what, I was coming in on running, couldn't tell, I knew it was a fight, because obviously that was my first, someone told me there was a fight going on.
And at that point, let me ask you this. What is your concern, and I'm asking for your thoughts and your opinion, why do you care at all that there's a fight going on?
Because I thought it was kids or players in my event. I had no idea who was fighting or why. My biggest concern was that they were kids, because they all had to sign liability waivers. It was all, under my umbrella at Westwind. So once I realized it wasn't kids, it had nothing to do with me.
Right. But your concern coming out, and I'm going to use the term investigated. You can use your own term, and I don't want words in your mouth, but you wanted to make sure that it wasn't something relating to the tournament that spilled out into the street?
Correct.
So, you said at some point when you get down there, you now can see both Morris brothers.
Yes.
And at that point, when you encounter both of them, because for a time you could only see one, correct?
Yes.
When you encounter both of them, can you see the individual that's laying on the ground yet?
Yes. But he, like I said, he was more further down the curb, and once I realized it wasn't, kids, and it was really brief. I mean, literally maybe 5 or 8 seconds that we were even, once we got down there, it just stopped and we went back up.
So you see that person but are there individuals, and I'm not asking you whether you can identify these people, or is it just one individual laying on the ground and the two Morris brothers?
No, there was, sorry to cut you off. There was someone else that walked back up with us. I don't know who that guy was, but someone else walked back up the drive with us.
Do you want this frozen?
You can show the lights on, please.
Do you want that frozen and printed?
Yes, sir.
Mel, could you do that for me? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn the lights back on. Thank you.
Do you ever remember, and we talked a little bit about, you saw the Morris brothers park their car, and you showed on the map where that was, up in the parking lot, up in the right side of that exhibit. When you saw the Morris brother, when you exited the gym and yelled out, "Hey Morris," was he standing by the car?
Yeah, the car had moved. The car was moved up to where he was.
Okay. So at some point, based on what you had seen earlier in the night, and then at that point, the car had moved from the initial parking spot down there.
Yes.
I'm going to take it you didn't see the car drive down there.
No.
Okay. So, is your recollection that besides the two Morris brothers, the individual lying on the ground, and I'm excluding you and Coach Halal, there was just one other individual that you recall being down there?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
sitting here, I can't remember what I said then. I will go off of what I said on that. But as of now, yes, because that's who walked back up.
Just give me 1 second, Mr. Moore.
Yes.
If I can approach the witness, Judge. Exhibit 177. I'm looking at page 14 of the first interview.
Basically, top half of this down into here.
So from here to here?
Yeah, from the top of the page down to here, just read to yourself.
Now you've had, oh, did I cut you off, sir? Okay. Now in reviewing that exhibit, page 14, does that refresh your recollection at all in terms of what you said to the detective that day?
Yes, a little bit. I mean, I still don't remember how many individuals were down during the fight.
Okay.
Sitting here, but reading this, it says I said there was 3 down there with Mr. Hood.
And you believe that the questions that were asked before, your memory about specifics as to that night would have been more accurate at the time you
Right.
were interviewed, which for purposes of this was January 25th.
Correct.
That was the day after this assault?
Correct.
And you were truthful in your response to law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
So back then you had told cops there were an additional 3 men potentially down there, is that right?
Yes.
And you indicated that there was the discussion with you and the Morris brothers, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And so I frame it right. Is your recollection that both of them were present for the discussion you've already talked about, what's going on, that discussion, or just one of them?
No, correct. They both were.
Now, obviously, you can try and describe an event and small details will change the number of times you tell it. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Do you recall that there was a time you told law enforcement that it wasn't so much of it wasn't a discussion, but you used the phrase MFing them?
You mean when we were coming back up?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that conversation.
It wasn't really a conversation. They didn't say anything back. I mean, one was like, "Coach, it's okay, chill out," kind of thing. But I was just really venting my frustration on what was, the circumstances that were going on.
And what were you frustrated about, Mr. Moore?
The fact that we had professional athletes at a basketball event that kids look up to, and there was an altercation going on in their area that, you can speculate all you want, but that's what I was just upset about.
I'm sorry to cut you off. You were upset about that?
Yes,
And it was clear to you when you got down there and you had that exchange of what's going on, there's nothing going on. Was it clear to you that there was something going on down there?
yes,
And was it clear to you that somebody had been hurt down there?
yes.
And what were your impressions of that situation? Because you're processing all this, you said you see one individual down on the ground and an additional 3 individuals in reviewing that testimony around him. Do you recall ever seeing anyone administering blows? And I understand it's dark, but any type of physical contact between any of these people?
It was just a lot of kicking.
And to be clear, the kicking you see is not being done by the Morris brothers when you see this, correct?
Correct.
Obviously, and I'll strike that, you would have seen this prior to walking back up to the gym, the kicking motion.
I would have seen it. I don't know what you mean.
Let me rephrase that question, because I believe your response is you don't know what I mean.
Right.
Okay. After you get down there and you have the conversation, what's going on, nothing's going on. At some point you walk back up and then that is when you're venting.
Yes,
The kicking that you saw happening to the individual on the ground by 3 people, that occurred before you ever walked back up, right?
correct. That was when we were coming down. That's when I saw it.
Okay. And based on what you're testifying to here today, you indicated what's going on, response, nothing's going on, and you said it was clear something was going on. Are you seeing the kicking going on before you asked them that, or while you're having this conversation, or do you recall?
It was all at the same time. Like I said, we weren't down there for very long. I mean, less than a minute probably. And it all happened so quick.
But you were able to tell at that point, these are not high school kids.
Correct. And once I realized it wasn't high school kids, it did not pertain to me any longer.
When you see the individual lying on the ground, do you recall whether or not you saw him moving at all?
When we came back up, me and the facilities director, Mr. Joe, we walked back down. And that's when we went back to check on him. On the
Okay,
individual.
so let's talk about that. You walk up, and are the Morris brothers walking back up with you?
Yes, me, my assistant, the Morris brothers, and then one other individual. We all walked back up. By that time, the whole gym, everyone that was in the gym was now in the parking lot and outside. So I got everyone, back in their vehicles and out and was leaving the property.
The individuals that you saw that night down, when you went down to the gate, do you know anything regarding identifying characteristics? So let me say this. Do you know the race of those individuals? Would you have any idea as to the race other than the Morris brothers?
They were African Americans.
Do you know whether, besides the Morris brothers who you encountered down there, whether any of the individuals you saw at the time you walked down there had been present in the gymnasium, or could you tell?
I couldn't tell.
So now you walk back up, and you're walking back up with the Morris brothers. Where do they go?
They went right to their car.
And you said there was a third individual with them?
Yes.
So he's walking back?
Yeah, he went with him.
What can you tell me about this individual? Was he African American?
Yes.
Any other distinguishing characteristics you can remember?
He was just shorter, a lot shorter than all of us.
All right, let me give some frame of reference here. You would agree with me the Morris brothers are extremely tall individuals?
Correct.
How tall are you, Mr.
6'3".
6'3"?
Oh, yes. And my assistant is 6'7". So we were all a lot taller than the individual that was.
So you were on the smaller side for the group.
Correct.
Was the individual that was walking back up with you, not Coach Halal, not the Morris brothers, was he shorter than you? Not Coach Halal and not the Morris brothers. Was he shorter than you?
Yes.
Significantly?
Yes.
Okay. And was he saying anything?
No.
And you indicated that during the time you were lecturing the two Morris brothers, they weren't responding at all to you.
Like I said, one mentioned, Coach, it's okay, chill out. That was, and I couldn't tell you which one said that.
I don't want you to guess, Mr. Miller. So they get into their car, the two Morris brothers and the third individual. Where do you go then?
I go up to the picnic tables area and get all the kids, because like I said, it was two teams still there, a couple of spectators, and I got all of them in their vans and loaded up and got the facility cleared. And then I proceeded inside to get Mr. Joe, who is the facilities director for the Arch. And then we came back out and then we walked back down to check on the individual down there.
Okay. Two questions within the realm of what you just described. The person that was on the ground and the other two African-American individuals, when you walked up, as far as you know, they stayed down there?
Yes, I mean, yeah.
They didn't walk back up with
No,
you?
they didn't come back up with us. But I don't think they stayed. I think they took off running down Coulter.
Okay. Where during all of this, if you recall, was the female that came to call for your attention?
I have no idea. When I saw her in the little lobby area, after that, I didn't see her again until she had her car down in the corner getting Mr. Hood into the vehicle. That was the next time I had, recollect seeing her again.
Okay. Do you recall during the time frame where you were interacting with the Morris brothers, a conversation happening between her and the Morris brothers at all? Did you hear that? Okay. And your recollection is you don't recall her being around the times where you walked down, walked back, and walked down?
No. When we walked back down the second time, like I said, she was in the car. She was already down there getting Mr. Hood in the back seat.
So when you walk back down there, how long is this all taking place from?
I would say between 5 to 10 minutes, roughly. I mean,
When you walked back up to get Mr. Murray, did you have to go searching for him, or was he around?
oh no, he was around. He was in that room with us, with the referees, where we started.
So you walk back down as the individual who had been laying on the ground. Is he still on the ground when you get down there?
No, well, by the time we got down there, she couldn't get him in. They were kind of like, he was falling and couldn't get in all the way. But he wasn't where he was when we left. I mean, he was up getting in the vehicle.
And from what you could see, did it appear that he was hurt?
I mean, it wasn't like he was just crazy bleeding or anything like that, but I mean, it looked like he got beat up pretty bad.
Did it look like he was struggling to walk back to the car?
But he couldn't. I mean, she was trying to carry him. He couldn't even stand up.
Now, at some point, when you went down there, do you remember the female, at this point, she's down trying to help the individual who was laying down. Did she ask you guys for help or anything like that?
No, she was still screaming frantically.
Okay. And do you recall what she was screaming?
It was the Morris brothers. It was the Morris brothers. That's all she was screaming the whole time. She probably said it, it felt like 10 times. She was just, that's all she continued to scream the whole time.
And did you have any conversations with the individual who was laying down on the ground?
Not once.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. What you come in to testify today about, and we've talked about, let me rephrase that, we talked about the reports and you indicated you believe your statements to law enforcement were accurate at the time.
Correct.
After this encounter occurred, did you ever receive, let me say this, pressure to try and influence what you were going to tell police?
Yes.
Okay, and let me ask you this. Did you receive a phone call in the days after this assault from an individual by the name of Alonzo Hickerson?
Yes.
Okay, and that is a person who you knew prior to the 24th of January 2015?
Correct.
And did you get the sense that Mr. Hickerson was trying to figure out what it was you knew at that point?
Yeah, I mean, he was trying to get me to elaborate on the situation that happened. And this was after I'd already spoke with one of the detectives who explained to me not to speak on it. So I kind of kept it brief and didn't elaborate or get too in depth with it.
Did Mr. Hickerson make a statement to you trying to get you to say that you knew more about the Morris brothers' involvement than you really did?
Yes.
Okay. What did you say in response to that?
Before he could even get into it, I kind of just told him I wasn't getting involved with that. There's not a price tag on me in that regards. And I left it at that. And I didn't entertain it to the fact that he was even being serious, because it seemed kind of surreal that you would try to do that.
Okay. Did, and obviously in the weeks, in the months after this event, you realized that this was a highly publicized event.
Well, I knew that night it was going to be.
You knew that night? Did that, let me ask you this, did the fact that Mr. Hickerson called you and tried to persuade you to say more than what you saw, did that impact your statements to law enforcement at all?
Not at all.
Did that impact what your testimony is in court here today as to what you recall occurring?
Not at all.
Okay, so in terms of what you're in here today, that's your truthful recollection of the events on January 24, 2015?
Right.
No further questions for the witness. Oh, and Judge, for purposes of, would you, if we admit the exhibits that he's marked at this time?
Any objection, Mr. Eckstein?
No objection.
No objection.
235 and 236 are admitted.
Judge, I would ask that this one be frozen if it wasn't already. I think it was.
Why don't you come up and review 235 and 236? I perceive those to be images of the document that witness wrote on. Those are the two that you want to offer?
Correct, Judge.
Could you make sure that defense counsel see those? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to show the other guy. You object to it? No.
.235 and 236 are admitted. Mr. Ballinger, whenever you're ready.
He has his transcript.
Yeah, so you have, I believe it's Exhibit 177 in front of you, Coach.
Yes, sir.
And those are the interviews that you gave in this matter. May I, Coach?
Yes.
One of you guys. But the other coach don't. But he says.
So, Mr. Miller, you had, prior to the evening of January 24th, you had no prior contact with the Morris brothers, did you?
Never seen him in person before.
And you have no relationship with the Morris brothers, other than the brief interaction you had with them that evening? And you're not somebody that's starstruck by NBA players or
That's something.
starstruck by NBA players?
The year previous, I worked in Las Vegas at Impact, and that's all we do is train pros.
And in fact, many of the players in the schools that you were associated, Westwind Academy and where you are now, those are players that are really good basketball players and go on to D1 programs.
Correct.
Fair enough? Okay. So as you explained it to Mr. Fisher, you were in the foyer of the gymnasium. I'm going to also use, but we can use this. In the gymnasium, when a woman came in and said that there was a fight outside.
Correct.
You don't know who that woman is.
No idea.
And after she came inside and said there was a fight, you never remember seeing her again until many minutes later when she was down at the end of the driveway in her car.
Yes.
Fair enough? So she wasn't with you when you went down the driveway, which is that right there. She wasn't there when you were going down the driveway to see what was going on towards Boca.
No.
And she wasn't anywhere around once you turned around and walked back up with the Morris brothers.
No.
Your primary concern when you heard there was a fight was that it was kids from the teams that were playing at your event. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So when you came out, you were looking to see if there were kids in a fight.
Yes.
I believe you told Mr. Fisher that you were the first one out and that Coach Halal, and that's H-E-L-A-L, Mustafa Halal, he was behind you coming out.
Yes.
You remember that? And that you actually, and I'll back up in a minute, but you actually made your way down towards this Ramada that's on the diagram, and you were in front.
Yes.
When you first came out, you said that you saw a Morris brother, right?
Yes.
Did you later come to understand that that was Markeith Morris?
I still to this day don't know which one it was.
Do you remember ever being told by your assistant coach that that was Markeith?
Yeah, Mustafa had told me which one he thought it was, and I don't even think he was definite on which one it was.
But it was one of the Morris brothers.
Yeah, the way he mentioned it was the better of the two.
Did he ever identify which one was, and I hate to do that because they're different.
Not that I recall, just that it was the better one of the two. That's the way he explained it to me.
Okay, and you said that you saw them in the parking lot, and I'm going to saw the Morris brother in the parking lot right at that red mark right there,
Correct.
which is on exhibit 235. Was he by his car at that point?
Yes.
How far do you think it is from the edge of that parking lot down to the Ramada? It's a pretty fair distance, isn't it?
Yes.
There's a soccer field. If you look at the field over to the right, that's actually a soccer field
Yes.
and goalposts. And so that's approximately 100 yards long, that field, maybe a little bit longer than that. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And then you said you yelled to either Markeith or Marcus, who was ever by the car, Morris. And then at that point, you yelled to Morris. And then at that point, the Morris brother that was at the car started making his way down the driveway.
Yeah. Yes. It wasn't like he took off sprinting. I mean, he kind of like a light jog down there.
And you said, is it fair? On exhibit 235, that red mark that my pen is pointing at, right by the parking space, he was right in that vicinity?
Yeah. Yes. He was Yeah, the car was parked in the first spot beside the curb.
And then you said you started, you followed this Morris brother down the driveway at a light jog. There's no conversation between you and that Morris brother at this point.
No,
You weren't told, stop, don't go down there.
no,
You were never prevented from going to the fight at the end of Coulter, were you?
no,
You were never told, you were never physically stopped from going down there?
no,
You were never intimidated from going down there?
no,
You never felt threatened about walking past one of the Morris brothers to go down and see what was going on?
no.
In addition to the interviews that you did with Detective Santos, you remember you did an interview with us? It was telephonic, and it was probably, I don't know, 2 months ago or so?
Yes,
Okay. During that interview, you told us that when you were going down to Coulter Street, that you got parallel to the Ramada, is that what you referred to as the dugout?
yes,
Okay. You told us that you got to the Ramada and that you didn't get any further than that with the Morris brothers. Do you remember that?
well, I mean, I probably just utilized that to give you an idea where we were.
Right. But I'm going to, Coach Judge,
You may.
your interview that's dated, it's in that exhibit 172. It's dated July 28, 2017. And if you look at page 13, and then and you see at the upper left-hand corner, it says Eckstein, and then below that it says Miller.
In the upper which corner?
It's on page 13 of the interview dated July 28, 2017.
Right, I'm in there.
Okay. I want you to just read the first dozen or so lines, down to where you say he stopped, we all stopped.
How far down the drive?
I would object, I would ask, are you asking to refresh his recollection, read it to himself?
This is going to be a prior inconsistent statement, Your Honor.
Are you objecting? He's indicating it's a prior inconsistent statement. Are you objecting?
His first statement to you, and then he's,
My objection would be improper impeachment to let him review the statement and either adopt or reject it.
Just a moment, may I please be? Which line do you believe is a prior inconsistent statement without reading
E.
it out loud,
you want me to come up, Your Honor?
please?
There wasn't it?
I mean, yeah, it was 10 o'clock at night.
Right. It was, I'm sorry?
It was around 10 o'clock at night. I mean, it was late, 9, 10.
If I told you it was approximately 7:20, 7:25, would you have any reason to dispute that?
It was after the last game, so whatever the scheduled last game was.
And in any event, on January 24th, the sun set at 5:52 p.m., so the sun was down. It was dark. If you're looking again at Exhibit 178, like 177, when you were interviewed by Mr. Eckstein and I, And I understand that memory is a fleeting thing, but you advised us that you basically were even with the dugout on the driveway going down. See that?
Yes,
And I'll just read what you said. Mr. Eckstein asked, basically, you're even with the dugout on that driveway. Miller, affirmative, yes. Is that fair? Okay. And then,
can I, but understanding what's even with the dugout and now looking at the picture, I can tell that we were obviously below the dugout.
a little further below the...
I haven't been back at the arch in almost 3 years, so.
I get that. About how far away from what was going on at the end of Coulter do you believe you were?
Probably where you are to me now,
Right about here.
probably so, or where you were, yeah,
Right about here. Okay. It's about maybe 10 yards,
give or take.
give or take. Okay. And at that point, the one Morris brother that you saw coming down from his car in the parking lot had stopped right where you were, right?
Yes,
And you saw the other Morris brother a few feet further down,
yes,
but he was still approximately some distance from whatever fight was going on.
correct.
And you asked a question then of one of the, when you got there, you asked a question of one of the Morris brothers.
Just like I stated earlier, it was more of a generic question to everyone, what's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Is this one of my kids?
Correct.
And the answer was, this is not one of your kids, this is,
No, the answer was it has nothing to do with you. You know,
Has nothing to do with
it's- Right,
as you asked that question, and that answer was provided in that space of time, whatever fight was going on stopped.
correct,
So during the course of that question and answer, anything that was going on from here, from where you were, was over.
correct,
Never resumed again.
correct.
And you were never told by any of you, whichever of the Morris brothers it was, that you can't go down there. You weren't ever told that, were you?
No,
You weren't physically stopped from going down there.
no,
And in fact, once the fight stopped, and it never resumed again, you then walked back up into the parking lot with the two Morris brothers, didn't you?
and my assistant, and then the third individual.
And the third person. I believe the person that you, oh, strike that, Your Honor. You never got into any kind of argument with the Morris brothers down where you were standing?
No,
There was no confrontation?
no,
Once you realized that it was not kids from your event, you were done, you were heading back.
yes,
You never saw... I think I've already asked you about Miss Sherrod. Even during all of this, down to where you were, looking at what was going on at the end of Coulter, and then walking back, you never saw... We know it to be Sharika Sherrod. You didn't know who it was at that point, did you?
no,
You just knew there was a woman that was inside that told you there was a fight.
correct,
And then you never saw that woman again until many minutes later in her car at the end of the driveway.
correct,
There was, when you first came out of the gym, there was no fight or no altercation at all in the area immediately outside of the gymnasium. You see where my pencil is?
correct,
Anywhere in the picnic tables where it says picnic tables or door, no fight at all.
no,
The only fight that you're aware of was happening down here by where it says gate.
yes,
Fair enough. Okay. Mr. Fisher asked you a couple of questions by a gentleman named Alonzo Hickerson, and I want to get into a little bit more specifically regarding that conversation.
Would you like the lights on?
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
Would you like the lights on?
Sure.
Ladies and
Actually,
gentlemen,
like, if we could make them as dark as they possibly can so he can approximate how dark it is. We don't have to do that.
I can do that, but I'm going to turn the lights on, ladies and gentlemen.
You know Alonzo Hickerson,
Yes,
and you knew him at the time of this event,
I knew him before the event.
right? He called you about 2 days after the fight had happened, didn't he?
Yes,
And he asked you the question, I think you told us, can you play ball on this map? Remember him asking you that?
yes,
And then he asked you, he told you that he wanted you to get on board with saying that the Morris brothers were involved in this and did all of this. Do you remember that?
yes,
And you said, at that point, you said, no way,
right,
I am not going to get involved in that.
yes.
What was your impression of what Mr. Hickerson was trying to get you to do?
If I was going to speculate, that's what I would.
I want your
right?
impression.
My impression would be that was trying to gain some sort of monetary value out of the situation.
I think you told us earlier that he was, in addition to that, that he was trying to put together a plan to implicate the Morris brothers.
Better say, yes, he was probably trying to, the beginning stages of trying to put something together.
And you said,
No.
no way.
Right.
I don't have any other questions, Joseph. Thank you.
We're going to take one. Do you want to take one at 3:30 or would you like 1 minute? We're going to break about 3:30 unless you'd prefer to break now before your cross started.
Why don't we just break now?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to recess for about 15 minutes. All rise. Under oath, you may start your cross, Mr. Eckstein.
Good afternoon, Mr. Miller. You had described before a woman coming into that area just inside the entrance to the gymnasium building and yelling if there was a fight, correct? She didn't say anything about the Morrises at that point, correct?
Correct.
So I think, as you said, you go out to the parking lot, you see there's no evidence of a fight out there, right?
Correct.
And then you call out to a Morris, and you and one of the Morris brothers go down that long driveway, correct?
Correct.
And when you get down, showing you Exhibit 236, it's pitch black down there, right?
Yes.
And
It's pitch black on the corner, not the whole drive. The corner area where the altercation was taking place was really dark. Where the start of the drive, there are lights down there.
okay, so to be clear, sort of that space between where the Ramada is and Coulter Street, is that pitch black?
Looking from where I pinpointed us looking down was dark.
All right, so if where you're looking down is that larger red box, looking towards Coulter Street, it was pitch black.
Correct.
And when you got there, you saw that whatever had happened before, and it looked like a fight of some kind, but it was over, correct?
It was over once I was asking what's going on. It was still taking place as we came up.
Okay, so looks like there's going on for a few seconds when you arrived,
Yes.
and when you arrived, you saw a second Morris brother in the vicinity, correct?
Correct.
And that Morris brother was just standing there watching, correct?
Correct.
He wasn't in striking distance of this altercation, correct?
Correct.
And it looked to you like he wasn't involved, right?
Correct.
And then you believe he was probably within 15 to 20 feet of that altercation.
Give or take.
Mr. Miller, how long after the last game ended do you believe it was before that woman came in and yelled that there was a fight?
I'd say approximately 5 minutes. I mean, we had just got in and sat down. I mean, the refs were unlacing their shoes. We were just in there.
It wasn't 25 or 30 minutes,
No, correct, right.
closer to 5 minutes. Mr. Miller, you talked a little with Mr. Fisher, Mr. Bellinger about some communications you had with Alonzo Hickerson. I'm going to ask you some slightly different questions. You did speak with Mr. Hickerson in the days following this incident, correct?
Yes, but they all didn't pertain to the incident. But we spoke, yes.
At some point, you had some conversations involving this incident, correct? You did not speak with him the night of the incident, right?
To my record, correct. I did not speak with him that night.
And you didn't tell him that you actually saw the Morris twins kicking Erik Hood, right?
Correct, I never said that.
And you didn't speak with him, that night, including minutes just after the altercation, correct?
Correct.
And when you spoke with him some number of times, and I know you don't know how many, do you know how many times you spoke with him about the incident over the next couple of days?
It was just once he had left, it was probably the following Monday. We discussed, like I said, briefly, and that was it.
And when we spoke on the phone a couple months ago, what you told me is that during this conversation, you told Mr. Hickerson exactly what happened. Is that right?
I'm sorry?
When we spoke on the phone a couple months ago, and I was asking about this conversation you had with Mr. Hickerson, you said you told him exactly what had happened.
Exactly what I had seen.
Yes.
Right, but I didn't go into elaborate detail. I just kind of hit the high notes and kept going.
Right, and when we talked about that, what you told him was that you believed the person you saw, so marked on exhibit 235, where that red mark is in the parking lot, that you believed that was Markeith Morris, correct?
I didn't tell anyone that. I agreed with what my assistant had told me, and I said that it was the better one of the two.
Right, now I'm not saying that you told him you knew it was that, but based on what you had been told, you understood that the person who you saw in the parking lot and who you ran down the driveway with was Markeith Morris, right?
I told who that?
You told Mr. Hickerson that.
I don't recall even going into that grave detail of that, because that's something that I don't know 100%.
Well, I'm not asking you to vouch for whether that's in fact, an accurate assessment as to whether that was Markeith Morris or not. It's just asking what you told Mr. Hickerson in that conversation. You're saying now you don't recall?
I'm not understanding where you're getting with this. Were you the one when I interviewed on the phone that was speculating the whole time towards the end? Was that you?
I wasn't speculating. I'm just trying to get at.
Is that correct? That was you?
I'm trying.
I just want to get to the facts.
I'm trying to get to the facts. I'm trying to understand what you told Mr. Hickerson. When we discussed this 2 months ago, what you told me was I asked you this question.
Where are you?
I'm sorry, it's page 38. Can you pass it? Okay. So you might have told him, Hickerson, it's the last document in that set on page 38.
And Judge, I would ask that it's improper impeachment that he direct him to the statement and ask him if that refreshes his recollection.
Just a moment. Do you believe it is a prior inconsistent statement?
It is based on what he has just attested to.
Just a minute. There has to be question and answer first. Counsel, can you approach and you can show me where you're... You can ask the question.
What I said to you, Mr. Miller, was, so you might have told him, Mr. Hickerson, in that conversation you had with him, that Markeith Morris couldn't have been involved in whatever happened at the end because you had seen him in the parking lot. And you responded, right.
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Lackey?
Good afternoon, Coach Miller.
Good afternoon.
Coach Miller, you testified that you recognized the Morris twins, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and you never actually met them before,
No.
but you recognized them because they were, I guess, high-profile NBA players, and basketball's your field. And it's a fact, too, that you weren't able to identify anyone else there that was at the Arch Center that was related to this incident, correct?
Correct.
All right, you never identified anybody that may have later become known to you as Gerald Bowman as being present, right?
Correct. Yeah, I still don't know who that is.
Do you see anybody in this courtroom today that was there at the Arch Center that night other than the twins?
Not that I recall.
Right. Nothing further, thank you.
Outside of Mr. Hood that was here.
So, okay, so don't believe me, I'm not going to go through a whole lot of questions with you, but you did say you recognize Mr. Hood as being there,
Correct.
but no one else other than the twins and Mr. Hood?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is there any follow-up?
Just 2 or 3 questions, Mr. Miller. When you come outside and you see the Morris brother that's there, and you call out and you say, "Hey, Morris," and then you indicate to Mr. Bellinger, he kind of like jogs down.
Yes.
You then proceeded down, correct?
Correct.
You weren't running hand in hand with that Morris brother down.
Oh, no, we were not jogging next to each other.
Okay.
I was behind him as we were
Okay.
going down.
Can you give me were you within arm's distance or was it a little bit of distance?
No, I mean, I started where the squiggle line by the picnic tables, and he was there, so he obviously had a legitimate head start, and I wasn't sprinting by any stretch. So, but everything was in vicinity. I mean, maybe 20 feet, 25 feet.
Okay.
Guessing, I don't.
And then, when you encounter, well, I guess, let me ask you this. Do you have any idea from the time you come outside until you see the second Morris brother, so not the one you're following, you see him down there, do you have any idea where he was or what he was doing?
No idea.
No further questions.
Any questions of this witness from the jury? May this witness be released, Mr. Fisher?
Yes, Judge.
Mr. Eckstein? No objection. Mr. Ballinger? Mr. Lackey? No objection, Your Honor. Could you hand me that exhibit? You may sit down, watch your step. Next witness, please.
State calls Ms. Sharika Sharajah.
Retrieve her from the hall. You want it on? Fisher, would you mind taking those exhibits and returning those to Amy?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Rod, if you would come forward toward me, please. Right in front of my clerk, she's standing to my left wearing the peach sweater. She's going to confirm the spelling of your name and administer an oath to you.
solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the whole truth.
Mr. Rod, if you would please come around my court reporter, be seated to my right. I'm going to review a couple of rules with you. Go ahead and have a seat. The woman in front of you types up a word-for-word transcription of everything that is said here in the courtroom. All of your answers need to be verbal, out loud. You can't answer by shaking your head. I can see it, but she can't write it down. Also, you may know where the lawyers or I are headed with their questions, but she can only type one person talking at a time. So you need to be patient and wait for the question to conclude before you begin answering. Also, if you say mm-hmm or I'm probably going to interrupt your testimony to ensure that you're saying yes or no, so the record is clear as to your intent. Mr. Bailey, when you're ready, your witness.
Thank you, Judge. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Sharika Sharaj.
And Sharika, I'm unfortunately getting over a cold, so I may have trouble hearing you. If you can make sure you speak clearly and loudly so that everyone in the room can hear you, that would be great, okay?
Okay.
When you walked in with somebody. Who is that?
That's my grandmother, Barbara Sharad,
And why did you have your grandma come with you?
for support for me today.
Are you nervous being here?
No, I am not.
Okay. How long have you lived in Arizona?
It's going on 4 years.
And where do you currently work?
I currently work for Freedom Financial.
All right. Are you married?
No, I am not.
Do you have a significant other?
Yes, I do.
And how long have you had that significant other?
For 2 years now.
Have you ever testified at a trial before?
No, I have not.
All right. Are you familiar with a place called the Arizona Recreational Center for the Handicapped?
Yes, I am.
All right. And how are you familiar with that place?
That's where I was at for the basketball game that night.
All right. And were you there on January 24th, 2015?
Yes, I was.
And do you remember what time you were there at?
I believe it was around 9:30ish, 9:45 maybe.
Could you have been there around 7 o'clock?
Could be.
All right. And do you remember why you went there?
For a basketball game, I went to the basketball game to meet Erik.
All right. I'm going to back up. You said you live in Arizona now. Did you live in another state before this?
Before this happened, no, I lived here.
Have you always lived in Arizona?
No, I'm from Maryland.
Okay. So previous to Arizona, you lived in Maryland?
Correct.
All right. And you said you went to meet an individual named Erik Hood for a basketball game.
Correct.
And how long had you known Erik Hood prior to that game?
Probably was like a month, maybe, month and a half.
All right. How would you describe your relationship with him?
I met him actually at a basketball game at South Mountain. I had my kids there with me. He's actually sitting in front of me. He was really nice to my kids. They wanted to go to the concession stand and get some candy, and he overheard me talking to them. He asked if he could give them some money to get some candy, and I'm like, oh, well, that was really nice of him. And so my kids came back, and he actually said, you guys can keep the change, and I was like, oh, thank you. He was very nice.
Okay. So you met him at a prior basketball game?
Correct.
And did you and Mr. Hood have a dating relationship?
No, we did not. I mean, I had a crush on him. He was, he was cute. He was nice looking when I initially seen him. But no, it was not a dating relationship, no.
Okay, so were you ever what some people would say as like a boyfriend-girlfriend?
Never, no.
Were you ever a couple?
No, we were not a couple, no.
All right. And are you still friends?
Yes, we are still friends.
And how often do you talk still?
I talk to him still maybe twice a week.
Okay. And do you talk to him about coming to court?
No, I did not.
All right. And throughout this, how long have you been waiting to testify?
Oh, wow. It's been since Monday.
All right, so you've been here since Monday.
Correct.
And you said you're currently working.
Correct.
And have you had any difficulty getting here to testify?
No, I have not. I drove.
Okay. So you met Eric you said about a month prior to that
Correct.
basketball game? And on the night of January 24th, 2015, did you ask to meet up with him at the Arc?
Correct, yes. I texted him. I was asking him what he was doing. He stated that he was at a basketball game, and I stated to him that my kids were out of town and I was bored, so I was asking him, could I come? He was very persistent. He's like, no, the basketball game's almost over. And I'm like, well, I can still come, it's fine. He just kept telling me no. He did not want me to come for some reason. And he's like, it's too long of a drive, you don't have to. And I was like, well, I was very persistent, I'm coming, I'm bored. And so he's like, okay.
All right, so you drove out to the basketball game. Do you remember what type of car you were driving at that time?
Yes, I was in a Nissan Maxima.
And do you still have that Maxima?
Yes, I do.
All right. And so you pull up in your Nissan Maxima. Do you remember where you pull up and park?
Yes, so there is front parking in the front, and there's a curb, and I was the second parking lot. I was in like the second parking lot behind the first row. So I was in the second row, excuse me.
Okay, so we'll look at a map in a little bit, but you parked in one of the front spots at the gym.
No, I was on the second row.
I apologize, on the second row at the gym.
Correct.
And then what do you do next?
I walk in the gym. I think I text him and I said, I'm coming in. He's like, okay. I walk through the doors. I see him. He's sitting on the bleachers when you walk in towards your left.
All right, so let's back up a little bit. You said you walked in. How do you get into this gym?
There's one door that you walk through, and then there's another door that you walk through, and then there was a table that was set up, I guess where they like collect money, and then you go over to the bleachers.
All right. And so you walk into the gym, you see Eric, and do you go up and sit next to him?
Yes, I do.
And how long do you sit next to him for that game?
So I got there in the fourth quarter, because like he said, it was almost over. So there probably was about 15 minutes maybe left on the clock. 15 minutes left on the clock in the fourth quarter.
Okay. And during this time, does Eric indicate that he knows anyone in the gym?
No, we're just talking. He's asking me, what am I going to do after? I think I said I was going to go meet some of my friends in Scottsdale. And then he was like, oh, cool, that's fine.
So you're having basically idle chat with him?
Yeah, just a regular chat, correct.
Do you see anyone that you know in the gym?
No, I do not.
At some point, are you familiar with who the Morris brothers are, as they're referred to?
Yes, I am.
And that would be Marcus Morris and Markeith Morris.
Correct.
Are you familiar with them?
I actually went to a basketball game probably 2 days prior. The Suns were playing the Houston Rockets, so I seen them there playing.
So do you know them personally?
No, I do not.
You just know them as players on the Phoenix Suns basketball team?
Correct.
And you said you went to a basketball game a few days prior. Do you remember who was playing?
The Houston Rockets and the Suns were playing.
Okay. Do you see them come into the gym at all?
No, I did not see them at all come in at the gym.
Okay, so are you paying attention to anyone that's coming into the gym or anything like that?
No, we were towards like the middle of the bleachers, so you can't see that door. Like once you get into the gym, we're towards the middle, so you can see the court and you can see like the kids that are sitting towards the left on the bench. You can't really see the door.
All right, and you said you had a crush on Eric at the time, correct? So were you basically focused on...
I'm sorry, I didn't get your answer.
Yes.
And so are you basically focused on your conversation with Eric?
Correct.
Do you see Eric acting odd or anything like that to you?
No, he wasn't. We were talking about shoes, Jordans, the t-shirt he had on. But no, he was acting fine to me.
All right. And You said you stayed there, did you stay there till the end of the game?
Yes, we did.
At what point do you get up from the bleachers?
Well, Erik is talking to some of the players, the kids that were there on the team. They were talking to him. I take a basketball and I go out on the court and I start shooting around. And then he's just talking. I say we stay in there maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then they start saying like they're about to turn the lights off.
So at this point, when you're shooting around and Eric's talking to other individuals, is the game over?
Yeah, the game is over, yes.
Okay. And someone indicates to you that the lights are going off in the gym.
Correct.
Well, what do you do next?
We start to head towards the door. There, we walk out the first set of doors, and then we walk out the second set of doors.
All right. And once you walk out the second set of doors, what happens next?
There's a guy, he's posted up with like one of his legs kicked back on the wall. The other leg is down. His arms are folded like this. He makes a statement to Erik. He says, "What's up, Hood? You know what it is."
All right. And do you know who this person is?
No, I do not.
Did you ever see that person? Had you ever seen that person before?
No, I have not.
All right. Did Erik make any comments back to that person?
No, he was looking at him like with a puzzled face, like almost to say like, what? But I didn't hear him say anything. And I was looking as well, like, who is this person?
All right. And what does the person that made those comments to Erik do next?
He says, "What's up, Hood? You know what it is." And then he's standing there, and then someone darts in front of me, a short, dark-skinned guy, and he hits Erik. I'm on Erik's left-hand side. He hits Erik, like right in front of me in the back of his head.
All right. And did you get a good look at that individual?
Yes, I did.
All right. Did you see him running up to hit Erik the whole time?
Well, my focus was on the guy. We were both looking towards our right to the guy, what he was saying. So it kind of like blindsided me. He came so fast.
All right. And once he hits Erik, what happens next?
Erik immediately takes off running. He heads towards like the grass dirt area to where his car, I'm assuming he's running to his car. His car was backed in. Then he falls, he trips, and then that's when I notice another guy comes up. He's light-skinned, he has like a bandana on. He comes up, he starts kicking, punching him, and then I notice the other two boys, they're right behind him. They're hitting and punching him, which is the dark-skinned guy and the stocky, like light-skinned guy. And then that's when I noticed the twins as well.
All right, I'm going to stop you there, and we're going to try to break this down a little bit.
Okay.
So Erik gets hit, and then you said Erik runs.
Correct.
Where does he run to?
He runs towards the left, like his car is backed in on that first parking spot where like all the cars are. So it looks like he's running towards his car, but he trips, or I don't know if they tripped him or if he got tripped up, but he falls right there.
All right, so he falls in that area. Do you remember what is in that area?
In that area, it's like dirt, like grass, like brown grass area. It's like dirt almost.
Okay, so you watch him fall. Is there anyone else besides the people that are involved in this fight in that area?
No, there was not.
Do you see basketball players standing outside?
I didn't notice the basketball players until after.
All right. So when you were observing what's going on, the only people you see are these three individuals that are attacking Mr. Hood and then the Morris brothers.
Correct.
All right. And you said that the three individuals, well, I'll have you ask you again, when Mr. Hood falls, who's attacking him?
I noticed the light-skinned boy is attacking him, the dark-skinned boy is attacking him, the guy with the bandana is attacking him, and the twins are attacking him.
All right. So you see all five individuals attacking Erik.
Correct.
And how are they attacking Erik?
They're hitting and they're punching him and kicking him.
All right. So once you see this happen, what do you do?
I panic. I run back into the gym. I'm screaming, help, help. There's a referee, he's there, and then there's a white guy, he's there as well.
All right, so when you say you ran back into the gym, let's break that down a little bit too. What part of the gym do you go back into?
Okay, so the doors are still open. The first part of the doors, I run through that. I run through the second part of doors. There's like an office that they're almost like sitting in, they're conversating, and I'm screaming, help, help, come outside, there's a fight, my friend is getting beat up, and they just automatically dart out with me.
All right, and who did you say was in that office-like room?
There was a referee in there, and also, I'm assuming that he was a coach, I'm really not for sure, but there was a white guy that was in there too.
All right, was there anyone else?
I want to say it was 3 people that ran out, but I'm not for sure.
Okay, but you can only clearly remember 2 people.
I can only clearly remember 2, the referee, which was the black guy, and then the tall white guy.
All right. And I'm going to back up a little bit. When Eric's getting attacked in that area, and we're by the parking lot at this time, are we correct?
The grassy area is right behind the parking lot, yes.
Okay, so we're still closer to that parking lot?
Correct.
What is the lighting like in that area?
There's a light post that's right there. There's also like picnic tables. There's also like a concrete table. So there's like lighting right there as well.
All right, so is it lit well enough for you to see what's going on?
Yes, it is.
All right, and is it lit well enough for you to see some vehicles in the parking lot?
Yes, it is.
All right. So you ran inside, you went into the office, and you're asking for help. What happens next?
As we come back outside, the altercation has, looks like, I don't know if he's getting up or he's running, but it's moving down a little bit. There is, I'm not for sure what twin it was, but the referee took off. The white guy gets stopped by one of the twins, and he puts his hands up, almost to say like stop, you can't come down this far. And the referee's like, dude, you got to get out of here. You guys cannot be doing this. Not on this property. You have to leave. Like, get out. Everybody has to go. And he's very persistent that the guy cannot come any further.
Where are you at when this is happening?
We're in the street. There's like a long driveway, per se.
All right. And we're not going to look at it quite yet, but you actually were interviewed by Detective Santos a few times, correct?
Correct.
One of the times that your interview was later the night of January 24th, 2015 at the hospital.
Correct.
And you also did an interview with Detective Santos where you were presented some maps of the area.
Correct.
And did you draw on those maps and show where various things occurred based on what you saw?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, so you said at this point the fight has kind of moved down to the street area. Is that what you said?
Correct.
And what are you seeing in that area?
In that area, I lose sight. Like I said, one of the twins had stopped us. So by that time, the fight had moved down a little bit. I had lost sight of Erik, and he was very persistent that we could not come down there at that moment.
And, well, just a second. I'm going to jump to another question here. You said that there was the individual with the bandana.
Correct.
Do you remember where the bandana was on his face?
Yes, I do. It was wrapped like this.
Did you ever see that bandana on any other part of his body?
No, I did not.
And just so the record's clear, you signaled across your mouth?
Yes, like this. Yes, correct.
Across your mouth is a fair representation?
Across his mouth. Sorry.
You may continue.
Thank you. Do you remember what that bandana looked like?
It's like an army bandana.
Okay. When you say it's like an army bandana, do you mean a fatigue pattern?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And you are actually, later on, are able to identify that individual in a lineup.
Correct.
So the obvious question is, how are you able to ID that individual when he has a bandana around his mouth?
I could tell by his eyes and his ears.
All right. So you noted particular parts of his body that stood out to you. And also continue with him into where we are. Did you see that individual run down to the street area?
Correct.
All right. So now, working our way back down to that street, what do you see going on?
Then that's when one of, I guess that was the coach, the white guy, he had ran past the brother. They were running. I was kind of hesitant, so I was walking very slowly.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I'm sorry. When you say you're a little way, are you a little ways away from them?
Yeah, I'm a little ways away from them, correct.
All right. Why are you not running all the way down there?
Because he's seen my face, and I was standing next to the actual coach, so I didn't know if he would maybe try to do something to me, so I kind of let them go in front of me.
So were you scared to get involved in that situation?
I didn't want to get hit.
All right, so you said you're running down there, you're a little bit behind the coach and this other, did you say Morris brother?
Correct.
And what happens next?
Like I said, I lost sight of Eric. I didn't see him anymore. And then I noticed that they were all coming back, because that street is pretty long to walk down. So I noticed they were all coming back. That's when one of me and the twins had words. And then he's like...
I'm going to stop you there, and we'll get to that in a moment. But when you say you didn't see Eric anymore, did you see him being assaulted down by the street?
No, I did not see him down there being assaulted.
All right. And did you see anyone else in that area assaulting him or kicking him or anything of that nature?
I lost sight after that point.
Okay. And how is the lighting down at the end of that street?
It's very dark.
All right. So that's dark. You don't, and you actually are standing behind the coach that you said, the white coach?
Correct.
Okay. And then you said you start walking back. Where are you walking back to?
Heading towards like my car. They were all heading back towards where the cars were parked at.
All right. I'm going to ask you to just further describe what you mean when you say they.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the individuals that I had described, the light-skinned guy, the guy with the bandana, the dark-skinned guy, and then the twins were walking back towards the cars.
All right. And we didn't talk about it because maybe you had not observed it yet, but did you see a fancy car in the parking lot?
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I did.
And what type of car did you believe that to be?
At first, I didn't know if it was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, if they're considered the same things, but it was a very nice car.
All right, and when you say a Rolls-Royce Phantom, are you familiar with that type of car?
Not really. I've seen it a couple times on TV, but like I said, I didn't know if it was the Rolls-Royce or it was I don't know if those two coincide together.
Okay. When did you first see that car?
Not until they were walking back. It was almost like the car was lit up.
So you did not see the car when the initial fight was occurring?
No, I wasn't paying attention to cars at that time.
Okay. So you're walking back at this point with the individuals that you already stated, and you start to have a discussion with one of the twins.
Correct.
To be fair, can you tell the twins apart?
No, I cannot.
So if you were to look at the twins here right now, you don't know who's who?
No, I don't.
All right. But you're walking back and you know you're having a discussion with one of them.
Correct.
And what's going on in that discussion? What's being said?
I said, I can't believe y'all just did that to him. And he said, Shawty, you don't even know him like that. And then I said, yeah, but it's still wrong. And I said, and you don't know me. And then he goes, no, I said, excuse me. He said, Shawty, you don't even know him like that. And then I was like, well, you don't know me, that's still wrong. And then he's like, well, I'm from Philly. And I'm like, okay, and I'm from DC, so what are you saying? And then that was the end of the exchange.
Okay. So how long does that brief conversation last for? About as long as it took you to say it?
Yeah.
All right. And where are you walking to?
I'm heading back towards my car. So there, like I said, my car was in the second row. Their car was in the first row.
All right. And while this is going on, do you know where Erik is?
No, I lost sight of Erik at that point.
Did you know that Erik was down in that area still?
I assumed that's why I got in my car and I drove down that way, because they were coming back from that way when they got into their cars.
All right. And I failed to ask you this, but do you see Hispanic people in that area down in that area?
I don't notice them until I get in my car and drive down that area.
Okay.
We're still outside.
So I'm ahead.
Yes.
All right. And I didn't say this to you in the beginning, but the warning is attorneys ask bad questions sometimes. We think we do this a lot, so we think we ask good questions. But if I ask a bad question or something that confuses you, make sure you let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right, so you're walking back. You're headed to your car. Why are you going to your car?
They were leaving, and so I wanted to stay back and just watch to see what was going on before I pulled off. Like, I didn't want them to follow me.
Okay. At this point, do you see basketball players around the gym area?
Yes, I do.
What do you see?
I see that their phantom doors or their car doors are open. It's very lit up. There are kids standing around them and asking for pictures, like, oh, why you guys are still here? Can we take a picture with you? And they're just like laughing and joking.
All right. And this is by the vehicle that you believed is a phantom.
Correct.
Phantom vehicle. Who do you see get in that vehicle?
I see the dark-skinned guy. He's walking up. He's holding his chest. He's like breathing really heavy. He gets in the back. Like I said, I don't know the twins apart. I don't know which one hopped in the driver's side. But I can see him like standing up front while the doors open towards like the driver's side. And the kids are like around the back of it, like snapping photos and taking pictures.
All right, and you said you stayed back and waited for them to leave.
Correct.
Did they leave?
Yes, they did leave.
All right, and once they left, did you see any other cars leave with them?
I seen an SUV that was kind of parked next to their Phantom. A lot of people were pulling out at that same time after the fight was over, but I did notice like an SUV.
All right.
The dark color.
And you said you saw 3 individuals that were down towards that street get into the Phantom, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you notice what happened to the other 2 individuals?
They kind of moved, so they were moving so fast. I was focused because, like I said, their car was lit up. It has a lot of lights. So they could have walked in front of their car and got in another car, but they did not get in that Phantom, no.
So were you more focused on the Phantom?
Correct.
And you weren't really paying attention to the other 2 individuals?
Correct. I did not pay, but I know that they did not get in that car.
And you said there was an SUV that left about the same time?
Correct.
But to be fair, you don't know if that SUV was with the Phantom or not.
You have to wait for him to complete his question before you begin speaking. Could you please restate your question that said, to be fair, you don't know?
To be fair, you don't know if that SUV was with the Phantom.
Correct.
All right. Okay, the Phantom is gone. Are you in your car?
Once they pull off, I do get in my car. I drive around. Like I said, there's a long driveway. I put my high beams on because heading down towards there, it's very dark. So I'm looking. I finally get to the end of the driveway. I noticed the coach and the referee are still down there. They're standing around. I put my car in the park. I'm still sitting in my car at this time. I have my windows down, and I'm looking, and I see Erik, and he's like slumped over by the gate, by that grass area.
All right. And have you parked your car there?
My car's parked, yes.
Who else do you see in that area?
I also see there's like some Mexican people. They were boxing or doing something there at that like gazebo.
So there's a structure down there. Is it safe to say there's a structure down there by the street?
Yes, it is.
Okay. You folks have to be careful not to talk over one another, please.
There's a structure down by the street.
Correct.
And you see two Hispanic people. Are they at that structure?
Correct.
All right. Who else do you see?
I see the coach. I see the referee. There's a lady. Not for sure who that lady is. There's people still right there standing.
All right. And you said Erik looked hunched over?
Erik was laid down on the ground. He was slumped over.
All right. And what do you do once you see that?
I'm like, Erik, come on, get up, get up. I'm saying, get up. He's like he's non-responsive, like almost like he's out of it, like dazed or unconscious. The coaches are saying, come on, man, get up, get up. He attempts to try to stand up. The coach is like, open your back door. We're going to slide him, because he's very tall, we're going to slide him on your back seat. I'm looking as Erik's trying to stand up and walk, he immediately like falls over. Like his whole body is limp. He just falls and hits the ground. And I'm like, oh my God. Like at that point, I really thought that he was dead. I've never seen anybody stand up and fall like that.
All right. Well, what happens next?
And then the coach, they're like, come on, man, come on. They're trying to help him up off the ground. They're doing all the work. They're lifting him up and they're putting him into my back seat.
And does Erik get into your back seat?
It was hard, but they finally got him in.
What do you do at that point?
At that point, they're telling me, they're screaming, you need to take him to a hospital. You need to take him to a hospital. I'm telling them I'm not from this area. I don't know where the hospital is. And they're like, you need to get him to a hospital. He doesn't look good.
And where do you go at that point?
That point, I pull out at the end of the driveway. And then I'm like, well, I gotta call 911. I don't know where I'm going. Like, so I call. After that point, I'm driving. I see like a YMCA. I pull over into the YMCA and I call 911.
All right. And why did you pull over into the YMCA and call 911?
Because I could not drive and think at the same time. I was so frantic. I've never seen anything like that. And I could not focus on driving and talking at the same time.
Do you know if anyone had called 911 back at the Arch?
That I do not know.
Right. Did it seem like anyone was trying to help the situation with emergency services to you?
No.
Okay. So you've pulled over into the YMCA and you're calling 911.
Correct.
Do you get directions to a hospital?
Yes, I do.
All right. What do you do next?
Then they give me the directions to the hospital. When I get to the hospital, there's no way that Erik could even walk. So I said, just hold on, just hold tight. I'm going to get you help. I rush into the hospital. I'm asking the lady, excuse me, we need help, we need help. They come out, they have a wheelchair for him. And they're like trying to get him out of the back seat until a wheelchair.
All right. And does he eventually go into the emergency room or the hospital?
Yes, he does. Once they get him out the car, they get him into a wheelchair and he does go into the emergency room, yes.
What are you doing during this time?
I go park my vehicle once they took him in, and then I came in afterwards.
All right. And when you said you came in afterwards, where do you go?
Just into the waiting room. They had us sitting in the waiting room.
So while Erik is getting treated, are you with him?
Yes, well, we had to sit in the waiting room for about, seemed like an hour or so. So he's just sitting there in pain. The lady, she's coming, she's trying to give him water. He's saying his mouth is very dry. He's like hyperventilating almost. And he's just like sitting over in the wheelchair, like slumped over.
Okay. During this time, are you talking about what's happened?
I'm sorry?
During that time, did you discuss with him what happened?
No, we did not.
How is Erik doing during this time? You said he's like hyperventilating. How does he appear to you physically?
Like out of it. He's in a daze. He's breathing really heavy. He wasn't all the way there.
All right, and you said you sat there for what felt like about 45 minutes to an hour?
It was a long time. I had to actually get up and ask the lady, like, is somebody going to help him? He's in pain. Can you guys bring him water? And then she eventually brought him water.
Okay. Once they get him, what happens?
Once they get him, they take him back into a room. They start running tests on him.
Are you with him at that time?
I'm sitting in the room. When they take him out to do tests, I did not go with him.
Okay, so you're in the hospital, you're in the waiting room. They've brought him back. Is there like a patient room?
Yes, I go back with him in the patient room, yes.
And you wait in the patient room while they're doing tests on him?
Correct.
Do you remember about how long they did tests on him for?
It was a while. I would say they did tests maybe 2 hours. It seemed like a pretty long time. They were running tests on him.
Okay, and you wait there the whole time?
I'm waiting there, yeah.
All right. During that time, you've called 911, correct?
Correct, I already did that.
Do they tell you that police officers are going to be sent to the hospital?
Yes, they do.
And do police officer, or at least a police officer, show up to the hospital?
Yes, they do.
About how long after you arrived to the hospital did a police officer show up?
I would say maybe about 45 minutes to an hour later.
Okay. Are you still in the lobby of the hospital, or at this point have you gone back to the patient room?
I've already went back to the patient room.
All right. And when the police officer comes in, is Erik with you still?
He might have came back from testing, and then the police officer said that he needed to take me out to question me.
All right. So you're not certain if the police officer came into the patient room when Erik was still there, or if he had already been back from the testing?
No, when the police got there, Erik was just, I want to say he came back from testing, and the police was definitely in there when I was in there and Erik was in there, yes.
All right. When Erik came back from testing, how did his physical appearance look to you?
He's still out of it. He's like slurring his words. He's not talking clear to me.
All right. So he looks hurt still?
Yes.
All right. And does the police officer keep you in the room with Erik when he's is having a conversation with you?
No, when he takes me out and he tells me that he needs to go talk to me privately. He told me to wait in the hallway. They were going to talk to Erik first, and then he was going to come back to get me.
All right. Prior to that, had you have any discussion with Erik about what happened at the ARC?
No, I was just trying to like be there for him. Like he was in pain, and I'm just like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And then I was asking him like, "Can we call somebody?" And then he was telling me he doesn't have family here.
Okay. All right, and then police have you in the hallway. Do they eventually interview you?
Yes, they do.
Do you know if that interview was recorded?
Yes, it was.
And did they tell you that they were recording it?
Yes, he did.
So it was very clear up front that you were being recorded?
Correct.
All right. Judge, may we approach?
Of course.